Chapter 360. The morning of the first weekend of March was dotted with fine rain and dew. The heavy rain from the previous night had made the ground slightly muddy. Dake went to the pavilion in the middle of the lake that led to Travelers Street. He sat in the pavilion for a while, letting his soul be cleansed. When more and more people came and went, he found a stone stool and sat down, waiting for the teleportation hub to move to this side. Then, with a slight twist, he was teleported to the other side. Walking out of the pavilion, he gradually blended into the crowd. From being independent to being lost in the crowd, a person's soul would go through a gradual process, causing it to gradually settle down. Dake didn't take long to arrive at the Cat's flower shop. Miss Cat, who was in charge of the shop, couldn't help but smile when she saw the young man walk in. This first-year student of the Aristocrat Academy hadn't come to the shop for a while. She wanted to give him a surprise. But today wasn't too late. Miss Cat, who was surrounded by cats, brushed the curly hair hanging down from her ears and stood up. She patted the debris on her apron and smiled at the blonde boy. Remember the URL? VIP, can't you? As soon as Dake walked in, he couldn't help but look at the cat grass growing on the flower pots on both sides. Spring was the season when the cat grass bloomed. Once winter was over, the cat grass became popular again. The catnip plants in the cat flower and wood shop were changed batch after batch. Every week, there would be new catnip plants in the shop. Miss Cat seemed to have mastered the wealth code. More than half of the cat grass was a baby kitten, so cute that it was against the rules. Good morning, Dimming. Good morning, Miss Cat. Dake looked up and said, "Is there a new cat grass in the warehouse? I mean, a new type?" Miss Cat's mouth curved into a smile. "Of course. I saved it for you. Come in and take a look." Dake was delighted and hurriedly followed Miss Cat into her secret room. The most eye-catching thing in Miss Cat's secret room was still the huge snapdragon plant. The snapdragon plant's eyelids were drooping, as if it would never wake up. It swayed gently under the support of its roots. As for the other cat grass used for testing, there were a lot fewer of them. No one knew if they were sold or returned to the factory for maintenance. "Come." Miss Cat waved at him and excitedly walked into the depths of the secret room. As the darkness in the depths of the room was dispelled by the light, a timid kitten hiding in the corner entered Dake's vision. He was originally looking for the lion grass, but he was instantly attracted by the cat grass. It was a dragon that was curled up into a ball. Its body was slightly thicker and rounder than that of a snake, and it was less than a meter long. The lower limbs were thicker and sturdier, while the upper limbs were thinner and shorter. Basically, it was between Eastern and Western dragons. There were only 2 round protrusions on the top of his head. Although they were dragon horns, they were not fully grown. This young dragon's scales were still very soft, very delicate and round. The color of its scales had a hint of blue. It belonged to the blue dragon species that was close to water. Miss Cat held the flower pot at the end of the dragon grass with one hand and hugged it tightly in her arms before turning around and walking back. Dake's heart skipped a beat when he saw the blue dragon whelp subconsciously stick its head into the crack. He couldn't help but ask, "Miss Cat, this dragon grass?" There was a hint of pride on Miss Cat's face. "Yes, this dragon grass has complete biological characteristics of a dragon. It's a rare product. Even in our laboratory, there's only one of it." Dake was startled when he heard that. He asked in confusion, "If there's only one, why are you selling it?" Miss Cat smiled mysteriously. "Because it's a failed product." "A failed product of other experiments?" Dake asked. "A failed product of other experiments?" Miss Cat nodded. "Yes. We originally wanted to develop loach grass, but because of an accident, we added a unique material, which caused the experiment to mutate." Dake asked, "Wait, which loach is loach grass?" Miss Cat smiled sweetly. "Loach as in loach." Dake was shocked. "Loach?" Miss Cat nodded. "So this dragon grass inherited some of the loach's habits. It's alert and timid, doesn't like to see light, and likes to crawl into dark and narrow cracks." "I see." Dake understood a little. He didn't ask Miss Cat why she was selling this unique dragon grass to him. After all, a question with an obvious answer like this required an underlying tacit understanding. But Miss Cat then said without any tacit understanding, "Of course, because it's very, very precious, it costs a little more credits." Dake asked curiously, "How much?" Miss Cat smiled and said, 998,988. You won't lose out, and you won't be scammed. It only costs 998. Dake nodded slightly. 998? An ordinary pot of cat grass only costs 50 credits, so 998 is 20 times the price. That's acceptable. Then I'll take this pot of dragon grass. What do I have to pay attention to when it's raised indoors? Miss Cat stroked the back of the dragon grass and said, "Like the milkweed, it needs to be fed a special potion continuously. We can provide the potion formula here. You can buy the ingredients yourself, or you can order them in the shop. Other than that, you only need an opaque water tank. It's best if it's small enough for it to curl up and crawl in." Dake, as expected of a cat. 998 credits was nothing to Dake. However, he understood in his heart that compared to the precious dragon grass, this price was a half sale and half gift. There were many shops in Traveler Street that liked to invest in students. This cat flower shop, as well as the Morgan shop that sold him the magic brain dropper, had successfully left a good impression on Dake. After buying the dragon grass, not only did Dake buy 3 more bottles of potions, he also received a free cardboard box that could fit a dragon grass. But he didn't leave. Instead, he continued to ask about the progress of the lion grass and rabbit grass. Lion grass and rabbit grass? Miss Cat tapped her lips and thought for a while, then said, "Sorry, it hasn't been improved yet. The biological characteristics of the lion grass are still unstable. As for the rabbit grass..." "Dake, what's wrong with the rabbit grass?" Miss Cat said sadly, "It couldn't survive this winter." Dake. He thought for a while and asked again, "Then, what about the lion grass that was in the shop? Even if it's defective, I can accept it." Miss Cat sighed and said, "It was sent to the factory for repair. We're a legitimate shop. In principle, we can't sell dangerous products that have failed to be improved. If you really want it, you need to show at least a letter of authorization from a professor. I can see if I can bring it back for you next week." Dake held the cardboard box that contained the dragon grass. After thinking for a while, he said, "What went wrong with the lion grass and rabbit grass? If you need, I can help." Miss Cat shook her head slightly. "It's a trade secret." "Is it?" Dake said helplessly, "Then I can't help it. I'll come back next week." Miss Cat smiled and said, "I'll try my best." Dake left the cat flower shop. Although the cat flower shop looked ordinary, the technology to improve the cat grass involved biological modification. It was definitely not a technology that could be developed casually. The fact that he could use the cat grass, which was clearly a plant, to cultivate a bird-type fruit was enough to show how terrifying this technology was. If the lion grass biological characteristics were not complete, there might be problems during the cultivation of the fruit of great sin. "I still can't rush it." Dake tiptoed the cardboard box in his hand and couldn't help but smile. What was a surprise? This was a surprise. Next, should I go straight back to the dorm or find a way to quickly replenish my magic power? The recovery speed of the mana recovery potion is too slow and not enough. I heard that there's a magic wine that can quickly recover magic power. Maybe I can ask Uncle Simmons about it. Dake pondered as he walked. Before he knew it, he had walked to the door of the ancient goblin bookstore. Coincidentally, this ancient goblin bookstore seemed to be having an auction. Dake had heard that this store would occasionally have auctions, but he didn't pay much attention to it before he came. He didn't see it last time either. Since I'm here, let's take a look. With the mentality of a supermarket shopper, Dake stopped in his tracks. This ancient goblin bookstore was as old as ever. It was making a lot of money, but it just didn't want to be renovated. Dake couldn't understand this kind of personality, but there were always people who liked this kind of stale atmosphere. Maybe those who liked to read were old-fashioned. He didn't squeeze into the crowd. Most of the auctions in the ancient goblin bookstore were held at the last minute, and there was no special notice or promotion. It was all about fate. Therefore, there weren't many customers participating in this morning's auction. There were only about 10 people. From their uniforms, they should be senior students. Most of them were from the School of Magic. The School of Fools was second. The School of Knights had one. The School of Aristocrats didn't have one. The old goblin, whose skin was wrinkled enough to squeeze a fly to death, was still wearing a tattered cotton-padded jacket. His expression was like that of a common merchant, not the owner of an ancient bookstore. He held a book that was as thick as a finger in his hand and shouted at the students. Obviously, this was the book that was being auctioned today. Dake narrowed his eyes, trying to see the title of the book, but the old goblin kept shaking the book up and down, making it difficult for him to see clearly. After a while, he could vaguely make out a few words. Synthetic beast? 200 credits. 200 credits. Only 200 credits. Is no one going to raise the price? This is... The old goblin's shout reached his ears. Dake raised his hand subconsciously. 300 credits. 300. A glimmer of light flashed in the old dwarf's eyes, and he immediately shouted, 300, 300, someone bid 300. Looks like this student has a discerning eye. He must have seen the value of this book in this old man's hand. If you want it, hurry up and raise the price, it'll be gone if you don't. Perhaps because Dake's participation was too abrupt, many students turned their heads to look at him. The student closest to him from the School of Fools casually said, Junior, it's just a book on making synthetic beasts. Although it has some collection value, the content might not be useful. There's no need to waste too many credits. He obviously had good intentions. The others who looked over also nodded, showing good intentions. Dake thought for a while, then smiled and said, Thank you for the reminder, Senior, I just happened to be interested. The Senior nodded and said, It's good that you understand. There are very limited ways to obtain credits in the first year, even if you have more than others, it's not good to use it carelessly. Then the Senior didn't say anything else, and turned to continue participating in the auction. Probably seeing that Dake didn't accidentally bid for the wrong book, the Senior didn't raise the price again. Dake successfully got it for 300 credits. He took out his school card, transferred 300 credits to the goblin boss, and then received the book from him. The cover of the book seemed to be made of a very hard material, with a metallic texture, but it wasn't heavy, and there was a hint of coolness when he touched it. I really got it. Dake took a look at the book, then quickly left. It was only 300 credits. Although it was indeed a spur of the moment when he bid for it, since it was in his hands, he didn't care too much. Title, Parkin Chimera's Guide to Making a Chimera. Walking through a remote path, he came to a small tavern that wasn't open for business. Dake knocked on the door, then pushed the door open and entered with a paper box. The owner of the tavern, the male elf Simmons, was lying on the counter, dozing off. The half-bottle of fairy wine standing beside him made Dake angry. He really kept it for himself to drink? Before Christmas, Dake specially came here to buy fairy wine, but Simmons sent him away with a no more. Now he wasn't stingy at all when he drank it himself. But seeing that he was most likely Professor Shi-Erfu's father, Dake didn't care too much. Uncle Simmons, are you still awake? Dake walked over and patted Simmons on the shoulder. Seeing that he didn't respond, he increased his strength. But Simmons didn't show any signs of waking up. Why are you drinking fairy wine so early in the morning? Look at how drunk you are. He thought about how he got drunk after just one sip. Dake felt helpless. It wasn't the wine that made him drunk, but he got drunk himself. Fairy wine didn't contain alcohol, but it was even more intoxicating. Dake put down the paper box, looked around, and moved Simmons from behind the counter to the reclining chair next to him. Then, he took the thick coat hanging on the wall and covered him. He pinched the edges and sighed. Spring had just arrived, and it was still cold. It was better to warm him up. Looks like I came here for nothing again. Dake walked out of the tavern, closed the door, and turned to leave. Everyone has worries, but not everyone has a day when their worries will be resolved. I can only give my blessings. Thank you to my fault 10086 for the golden treasure chest. I wish you good luck in the year of the ox. I wish you good luck. Thank you to under people for the silver treasure chest. I wish you good luck in the year of the ox. I wish you good luck in the year of the ox. I wish you good luck. Happy New Year's Eve to all readers. Welcome the new year. Celebrate the new year together. Chapter 361. After leaving the tavern, Dake went to Traveler's Street to restock on some experimental materials and bought some food and drinks. Only then did he pull the heavy cart back to the pavilion in the middle of the lake. If it weren't for the 50,000 credits, it would have been really hard to raise a bunch of babies at home. He hoped that he could successfully restart the Magical Animal Society in his second year. Then, he could apply for society funds from the academy to raise the babies. Dake smiled as he returned to the tower of the aristocrat house. The lingering effects of yesterday's dungeon adventure hadn't disappeared. There were still many first-year students chatting about dungeons in the common room. The 3 teams that successfully defeated the boss and the only team that triggered the dungeon escape device seemed to be the core of the conversation. The little magisters chatted and laughed. The atmosphere was very cheerful. Dake waved at the students who took the initiative to greet him and went upstairs. Dolong's team wasn't in the crowd. They were clearly digesting yesterday's gains. When he returned to room 201, Dake summoned the impatient Meow Meow. Meow Meow appeared in the light of summoning and immediately pounced to the corner filled with wood-carving materials and tools. It didn't forget to carve its own equipment. 1 second to remember. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP Dake saw Meow Meow's hurried appearance and couldn't help but cover his head. Speaking of which, I still haven't finished carving the equipment I promised the other magisters. No choice. I can only put it aside for now. Mia, Fairy Ibu eagerly came over and raised its ribbon antennae to point at the carton containing the dragon grass. Dake picked up the carton and moved it to the bedside. He then waved at the magisters and said, "New partner." The magisters looked over curiously, waiting to open the carton. Dake opened the carton and reached in to grab the dragon grass by the neck, trying to fish it out. However, the dragon grass struggled so hard that he couldn't fish it out. There's no other way. Doc calmed himself down and followed Miss Cat's instructions. He reached out and touched the only inverted scale under the neck of the dragon grass. The dragon's inverted scale was the only inverted scale that wouldn't harden with the growth of the dragon species. A large number of nerves grew inside the inverted scale, and the surface was covered with sensors that were abnormally sensitive. Whether it was the sense of touch, pain, or other senses, they could all be magnified several times. This was one of the dragon's most important treasures. The dragon grass perfectly inherited the traits of the dragon species, so it naturally had this inverted scale. After finding the inverted scale, Dake gently rubbed it. Meow, after a while, the dragon grass let out a soft cry. Immediately, it turned into a pile of mud. Dake's mouth. Come, say hello to your brothers and sisters. He grabbed one of the dragon grass claws and waved it at the magic fairy and the other cat grasses. But for some reason, the atmosphere. Although Dake couldn't wait to use the dragon grass to cultivate the fruit of great sin, the fruit of great sin wasn't enough, and he hadn't decided which one to use yet. So, he planned to raise it for a while and let it adapt to this house before cultivating it. As for where to raise it, because there was no water tank, it was temporarily raised in the Chochio Sea Lion's air cushion pool. The Chochio Sea Lion also quite liked this timid and shy dragon grass and soon stuck with it. Dake carefully observed for a while and gradually relaxed. Then he opened the book, Parkin Chimera's Guide to Making a Chimera, and flipped through it without much care. Parkin Chimera was a somewhat famous magus. On the title page of the book, Parkin Chimera claimed to be a great magus. But in fact, his attainments in magus were very limited. Even the surname, Chimera, was given to him by himself. The so-called Chimera originally meant female goat. It had the head of a lion, the body of a goat, and the tail of a python. It was synonymous with chimera. Giving himself the surname Chimera was nothing more than to flaunt himself as an expert in Chimera. However, Chimera was originally a forbidden technique that originated from the demon race. It was simply not on the table. Magus technology was all-inclusive and could be used to turn Chimera technology into one's own. But Magi generally thought that it was a crooked method. Instead of synthesis, why not fusion? Fusion was to fuse two or more Magus elves into one. Synthesis was to sew the parts of two or more Magus elves together. One was a fusion that could be freely dispelled. The other was just a superficial sewing. The difference was obvious. Parkin Chimera's Guide to Making a Chimera's Guide to Making a Chimera's Guide to Making a Chimera's Most Powerful Body Parts. Through the Magus elves' refining techniques, it would be sewn into a monster that had the parts of various monsters. Similar to it was a monster called Abomination, which was made up of many broken corpses. These synthetic beasts that were sewn together did not even have the most basic intelligence. Moreover, it was extremely easy to self-destruct. Perhaps it would turn into a pile of mud after being used. This kind of collapse was most likely accompanied by the magic card. The reason why Parkin Chimera was famous was that he had temporarily stitched together the corpses of monsters on the battlefield into a huge and ugly super chimera. The appearance of the super chimera shook the entire battlefield. However, in just 3 seconds, the super chimera turned into a pool of mud. Mud poured down and drowned half of the battlefield. So Parkin Chimera became even more famous. Just like what the kind-hearted senior had said, this was really a book that had no other use other than its collectible value. But useless didn't mean completely useless. The biggest characteristic of the Chimera refining method was that it had multiple cores. Dake's main purpose for purchasing this book was to learn how to use multiple cores to refine a magic fairy. The basic refining method taught to the first years had a clear restriction. They could only use one type of core material to refine. If 2 or more core materials were put in, the intense conflict between the materials would lead to an experiment accident. However, the single scabbard that Dake wanted to refine required 2 core materials, the Holy Sword and the Shield Turtle Jade. Even though his idea was to use the Holy Sword as the primary weapon and the Shield Turtle Jade as the secondary weapon, it was very likely that he would not be able to achieve this when he actually started to refine it. If he could obtain some relevant knowledge from this Parkin Chimera's Guide to Making Chimera refinement, he would be able to make appropriate adjustments during refinement. In that case, the 300 credits were well spent. Next, he spent a lot of time researching the Parkin Chimera's Guide to Making Chimeras, and finally found a solution. It turns out that the Parkin Chimera refinement method also has a clear main body. Although it seems to use the limbs of various monsters and has multiple cores, in fact, the other cores have been downgraded, and only one of them has been determined as the main body. Therefore, it does not violate the basic rules of the magic fairy refinement method. In this case, as long as I also downgrade the Shield Turtle Jade, I can generally reduce the occurrence of conflict. After confirming this point, Dake did a detailed research and record the method of downgrading. Then he put down his pen and picked up a wooden carving to practice carving while relaxing his nerves. That night, he carved a total of 3 pieces of equipment, but he did not refine them. This time, he was prepared to refine them in one go after accumulating enough. The next day was Sunday. Dake entered Traveler's Street with a clear purpose. He gathered all the potion formulas needed for downgrading, and then went to Uncle Simmons' tavern again. Simmons was at the tavern's entrance, lying on a rocking chair and basking in the sun. He looked good. Dake went straight to the point and directly stated his purpose for coming. Simmons changed the topic and asked, "You were here yesterday too?" Dake only nodded slightly, "Yes." "Good." Simmons propped himself up from the rocking chair and waved at him, "Come in with me. Looks like my luck is good today." Dake couldn't help but smile. As expected. When Dake walked out of the tavern again, there was a bottle of magic wine in his hand. And he only paid 100 credits. Dake, who knew that he got a big bargain, of course thanked Uncle Simmons, but Simmons just waved him away and urged him to leave if there was nothing else. And so he really left. Dake, who had returned to his dorm, put the magic wine on the table and carefully observed it. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. The name of this magic wine was elven wine. Unlike the intoxicating fairy wine, elven wine, didn't have a can only be sold to elves rule. In fact, it was an expensive wine that was very popular even in human society. There were many types of elven wine. The reason why they were collectively called elven wine was that they all used the legendary elven spring water. Elven spring water was also known as elemental spring water. According to the types of elements, the effects of the spring water were also different. The bottle of elven wine that Dake obtained was brewed with water elemental spring water and multicolored fruit. It could recover a large amount of magic power in a short period of time, which was exactly what he wanted. With the holy sword, the shield turtle jade, the downgrade magic potion, and the elven wine for mana recovery. Then all that was left was the Pride Reserve. The single scabbard wasn't a bird type, so he couldn't use the Pride fruit to upgrade it, nor could he use the bird type basic refining method. What was compatible with it should be the mechanical type or the undying type basic refining method. He chose the mechanical type because it was a steel sword with self-consciousness, and the undying type because it had the ghost attribute. But in the current situation, he had to choose one of the two. There's only one set of materials, so I can't do any reference experiments. I can only rely on my own knowledge to make a decision. I heard that the holy sword was originally a sword with a soul. The resonance between the holy sword and the hero is actually a resonance between the souls. The single scabbard is a Pokemon that was born after the ancient longsword was possessed by an ancient soul. This is also the origin of the ghost attribute. The sword and the soul can't be missing. If it starts with mechanical type, it will be mechanical type, ghost attribute. If it starts with undying type, it will be undying type, steel attribute. It's the latter. The sword's body is just a carrier, and the soul is the core. Now that I think about it, the legendary holy sword can also be classified as an undying type. How ironic. Dake finally finalized the plan. Then, he waited until 8 p.m. and extracted the great sin for the day. This time, he chose pride as the major sin. In fact, after confirming that he was going to refine the single scabbard, he had already changed to pride last night. Now, he already had 3 points of pride, and with today's 5 points, he had 8 points of pride. Although it was slightly unstable because it was less than 7. But Dake couldn't wait any longer. He had a strong urge to refine the holy sword that he had obtained. In addition, he didn't necessarily need to add great sin to help him refine it this time. So, he decided to follow his heart and not wait any longer. March 4th, 8 p.m. Dake Dimeng was ready to stew the holy sword. Sitting on the top of the cat tree, the Diru beast supported its chin and watched. In fact, it didn't want Dake to refine the holy sword. But Dake had been busy these 2 days, so it was obvious that he had made up his mind. As its master's magic guide sprite, it couldn't object at this time. So, at this moment, it could only watch. But on the bird stand, the little fiendish magical beast was cheering and jumping for joy, laughing to the point of forgetting itself. As for Meow Meow, who contributed the shield turtle jade, it was squinting its eyes and thinking about something. In such an atmosphere, Dake was still determined to refine the single scabbard. The refining method is undying species, steel attribute. The core material is holy sword, and the secondary core, shield turtle jade. The supplementary material is pride. What needs to be prepared are fairy honey, brain lobe essence, corpse fluid, steel attribute powder. In the basic refining method of the undying species, corpse fluid was an indispensable material. The Magus carved a magic circle in the graveyard and mixed the death aura and morning dew to produce a grayish-white liquid, which was the corpse fluid. Dake had already bought all the materials needed for the undying species and mechanical species. Now, he just needed to choose what he needed. Although it was his first time using the undying species steel attribute refining method, he wasn't unfamiliar with it. Half an hour later, he had already completed the carving step of the number 1 refining formation. But at this moment, someone knocked on the door. 2-in-1/4/100. Begging for monthly votes, almost first place. Chapter 362. Who else would knock on the door so late at night? Dake was slightly distracted, but his hands did not stop working. No matter who came to knock on the door, please wait outside at this time. He blocked the interference and continued to refine. The carving of the number 1 refining array needed to be done in one go and could not be interrupted in the middle. Moreover, the refining array needed for this refining needed a larger area, so it was more difficult to carve it. It took nearly a minute for him to complete the carving of the number 1 refining array. The refining array, which was half a meter in diameter, covered half of the experimental table. Dake finished the last stroke, then raised his hand and heaved a sigh of relief. At this time, the knocking on the door still did not stop. Dake turned his head and saw that Fairy Ivan was already ready in front of the door, obviously waiting for his instructions. Website: https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP, open the door. He nodded slightly at Fairy Ivan. Meow. Only then did Fairy Ivan turn around, stretch out its ribbon antennae, and turn the door handle. As a trace of cold wind blew in from outside, a human voice came from outside the door. A pink head timidly poked in. Fairy Ibu's face was suddenly filled with enmity. But even if it frowned, it was still cute. Eudora found that it was the one who opened the door, so she whispered, Thank you. Good evening. Meow. Fairy Ibu replied, then turned around and walked back into the room with elegant steps. Then I'm coming in? Eudora looked inside and saw that no one objected, so she got in through the gap in the door and closed the door behind her. She carefully walked into the hallway, her face a little uneasy. When she saw Dake in front of the experimental table, she mustered up her courage and said, Good evening. Good evening. Dake turned his head and said, What's the matter? Eudora lowered her head and said to Dake, No, nothing. I made a prophecy under Professor Midya's guidance tonight. Prophecy? Dake temporarily put down his hand and wondered, Didn't Professor Midya tell you not to make prophecies casually? Eudora hurriedly said, No, it's an ordinary prophecy. After saying that, her face suddenly turned red and she felt inexplicably happy. Then, she touched her fingertips and said in a low voice, It's like this. I have a prophecy that you will meet Saturn tonight. Dake was surprised. Saturn. Eudora whispered, Well, if you have any multiple choice questions to do, you can choose Saturn. Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he couldn't help but turn his gaze to the number 1 refining formation that was gradually glowing. Is this a reminder for me to use greed? Eudora stretched her neck slightly and finally found the magic card and alchemy array on the experiment table. She quickly covered her mouth and said, Are you doing a magic engineering experiment? Then, I won't disturb you any longer. With that, she turned to leave. Wait. Dake stopped her and smiled. Thank you. Eudora was obviously shocked by this sudden gratitude. Dake waved with a smile. Good night. Eudora quickly raised her hand and waved slightly. Then good night. After coming out of Dake's dormitory, Eudora leaned against the door and couldn't help but hold her heart. You've helped him, right? I must have helped him. Enjoy. She trotted back to the dormitory. Dake in room 201 had reorganized his mind and continued the experiment. Of course, he couldn't use greed just because Eudora said it was greed. But after thinking about it carefully, he finally remembered that the scabbard seemed to have the temperament of absorbing life energy by attaching itself to humans. He also felt that greed might be more suitable than pride. Then, he checked his reserves. Greed has 5. Originally, he planned to accumulate greed this month and refine a greed 3 card. So, he chose to draw greed on the first and second day of March. Now, he had some reserves by accident. No matter what, let's begin. It was useless to think too much. He could only see the truth after refining it. Dake began to prepare immediately. First, he pulled greed out of the insect branch, returned to the experiment table, and fully activated the number 1 refining array. Then, he began to take out the holy sword that had been soaked for half an hour from the prepared treatment liquid. As the main core of this refining, the treatment of the holy sword was very important. Although this was only one of the countless holy swords throughout history, it was still very difficult to refine it. Dake thought for a while and put it aside for the time being. First, he put the rest of the auxiliary materials such as saliva. As the halo of the number 1 refining array flowed like slurry, he picked up another secondary core, shielded turtle jade. After this dark purple orb was downgraded, the light on the surface was completely restrained. It was like a marble without any special characteristics. But its true power was still deeply contained inside. From now on, I can't regret it. After taking a deep breath, Dake put the shielded turtle jade into the refining array. Then, he picked up the magic pen and reached it into the light of the refining array and gently stirred it. With the continuous input of magic, the shielded turtle jade was gradually broken down and absorbed. After Dake confirmed that the shielded turtle jade was completely refined, he picked up the holy sword. Dilu Beast. Coming. The Dilu Beast immediately jumped down from the cat tree. Its paws touched the carpet without making any sound. It quickly walked to the experiment table and tiptoed to take the bottle of elven wine from the table. After shaking it slightly, it opened the bottle. Suddenly, a fruity fragrance overflowed from the mouth of the bottle. The Dilu Beast couldn't help but stick out its nose and sniff. Its face became a little red. This elven wine could indeed quickly recover magic, but its degree was obviously not low. This made it a little worried. However, Dark had already placed the holy sword into the light formation emitted by the number 1 refining formation. When the tip of the sword touched, ripples like water appeared in the light. He held the sword in one hand and the magic wand in the other. While maintaining the infusion of mana, Kiran sank the holy sword into the light circle. After a few minutes, the hilt of the holy sword also disappeared in the light. But at this time, the refining had just begun. Dake switched the magic wand from his left hand to his right hand and increased the amount of magic input. The light of the number 1 refining array began to flicker, sometimes strong, sometimes weak, and frequently changing. Whenever the light was too strong, the magic would be weakened. Whenever the light was too weak, the magic would be strengthened. This process repeated. After only 3 minutes, he felt that his magic was insufficient. But his expression changed slightly. The Dilu Beast moved the elven wine in front of him. There was even a straw in the mouth of the bottle. It could be said that the preparation was very thorough. Dake immediately bit the straw and drank a little of the wine. The wine that flowed into his mouth had a hint of sweetness and sourness. It had the taste of apple juice, but it was lighter. Unexpectedly, there was no strong smell of alcohol. Instead, there was a light feeling that flowed to his limbs. The magic that was originally lacking suddenly began to recover. But as his magic power recovered, he suddenly felt dizzy, as if he had drunk strong liquor. "I'm drunk." Dake suddenly woke up from his stupor. He immediately opened his eyes wide to keep himself sober. The magic that had just appeared a little bit chaotic suddenly stabilized again. Then the second sip, the third sip. Every time his magic decreased by more than half, he would take a sip of the elven wine. After a full hour, half a bottle of elven wine had gone down his stomach. Dake's face was flushed red. He tried his best to concentrate and deeply suppress the drunkenness outside of his cerebral cortex. There was no time to think. Until through the perception of magic, he confirmed that the holy sword had been completely refined. He relaxed a little. But the moment his mind relaxed, the drunkenness suddenly surged up. The after-effects of the elven wine almost drowned his consciousness. But almost at the same time, a transparent silhouette suddenly rushed out of the light formation of the number 1 refining formation. "Ha! This sudden shock instantly pulled his drowned consciousness out of the drunkenness. He immediately realized that this should be the sole consciousness of the Holy Sword. It was also commonly known as the Sword Spirit. Although this Sword Spirit didn't seem to have a complete mind. Instead, it was more like an evil spirit. The blurry human silhouette suddenly opened its hands and pounced on him like an evil spirit. He subconsciously leaned back. Then, a dark green shadow suddenly rushed forward and dispersed the evil spirit in an instant. Dake immediately mobilized all the magic in his body and poured it into the refining array through the magic wand. The suddenly rotating light array produced a suction force and sucked back the evil spirit that was scattered. Dake grabbed the bottle of elven wine and took another sip. Then he continued to pour in magic. It wasn't until another 15 minutes that he regained his calm. After such a long time of refining, the light array of the #1 refining array had stabilized. Dake used the magic braindropper to absorb 1 point of greed and carefully dripped it into it, then observed the reaction. The white light emitted by the refining array obviously brightened a little. But it wasn't enough. So he continued to pick up the magic dropper. It wasn't until he dripped 3 points of greed that the light of the refining array suddenly brightened. This made him heave a sigh of relief. If it's still not enough, there's no more. As the strong light emitted by the #1 refining array quickly subsided, the experiment returned to normal on the surface. But in reality, the internal refining of the magic card was still continuing. It was just that the next refining process was no longer something Dake could interfere with. He calmed his heart and waited quietly, and a tipsy feeling crept up. In his slightly hazy vision, wisps of white light drilled out of the magic card and wrapped it into a light cocoon. Another 5 minutes passed. The magic fluctuations in the light cocoon gradually slowed down. Finally, like a heart, the magic fluctuations became stable and regular. Dake then reached out and pressed his fingers on the light cocoon. As usual, he poured his own anticipation and magic into it. But this time, the magic injection caused the light cocoon to suddenly tremble. Then, a beam of white light like a blade instantly pierced through the surface of the light cocoon and rushed out for 3 inches. Then, that beam of white light swayed along the center line of the light cocoon and actually cut the light cocoon completely from the middle just like that. As the light cocoon gradually dissipated into magic light spots, the magic card that was wrapped in it fell on the table. All the light that was emitted was absorbed into the card and there was no more movement. Doc was a little surprised to see that the magic card on the table was clean, without any impurities. His gaze naturally focused on the surface of the magic card. It was a single scabbard. That was very different from what he imagined. A normal single scabbard was like a sword with a scabbard on the outside. The scabbard was brown and there were lines on it, a pattern like a ghost face. In the center of the scabbard, there was a blue eye. At the end of the scabbard, there was a long blue ribbon with a light blue end. It had a finger-like bifurcation and could be used as an arm. During battle, the scabbard would be wrapped with the blue ribbon, revealing the sword in battle. However, the scabbard on the surface of the card was in the shape of a short sword, almost the same shape as the Holy Sword. Although there was a scabbard, it was also white with a trace of light purple. It was completely different from the red color of the scabbard. This purple color, does it come from the shield turtle jade and greed? Dake thought for a moment and continued to examine. In addition to the changes in the shape of the sword and the color of the scabbard, the shape of the scabbard was more exquisite. The hollow lines on it were not like a ghost face, but like a spider lily, the pattern of a red spider lily. The eye in the center of the scabbard was also close to the blue-purple color, but the pupil was obviously more slender and not round. As for the ribbon at the end of the scabbard that could be used as an arm, it was the same as the scabbard, white with a trace of light purple. It was also narrower and longer. All in all, it looked more exquisite and had the appearance of a piece of art. This made Dake frown. He did not want the single scabbard to lose its original essence. Therefore, he immediately grabbed the magic card, infused it with magic, and waited for the feedback. Soon, the information of the single scabbard flowed into his mind. Card name, single scabbard. Type, Fairy card. Race. Undying. Attribute. Steel/Spectre. Magic power. 1500. Attack. 2200. Defense. 1800. Ultimate skills. Weapon form. Combo slash. Sword dance. Holy sword. It's actually a 4-star magic card? The single scabbard has 2 evolved forms. I thought it would be a 3-star magic fairy. However, as a 4-star magic guide fairy, its magic power is lower than I expected. Its defense is still passable, and its attack power is 200 points higher than a 4-star magic guide fairy's peak, which is in line with the nature of a holy sword. There are 4 ultimate skills, and it belongs to the gold card. Rather than saying it's expected, it's better to say that if it's not a gold card, it's not worthy of the name, Holy Sword. As for the ultimate skills, weapon form, Dake was suddenly stunned. 2 in 1 4000 plus. Chapter 363. Even though Doc had never seen weapon form in his Pokémon before, he was still able to use it. However, among the Yu-Gi-Oh cards, there were quite a few cards that had the same effect as its name. In Yu-Gi-Oh, there was a type of allied monster that could be transformed into an equipment card and equipped on the monster. When Dake saw the name of this ultimate skill, he immediately thought of a similar effect. He did not care about the other 3 ultimate skills for the time being. Instead, he infused magic into it again to obtain more information about the ultimate skill, weaponization. Weaponization. The scabbard can be transformed into a weapon, and the type of magic card will change accordingly. It can even change the type of magic card? Dake's thoughts had always been divergent. Almost immediately, he realized the crux of the matter. He remembered the website, Vipkanchu. 6-inch. Does this mean that after using weaponization, I can directly summon the scabbard as an equipment card? It can ignore the second-tier summoning restrictions and doesn't require a sacrifice to summon it. It can only be used as an equipment card for special summoning? Isn't this a little too much? But if it can really be done, Dake could not help but swallow his saliva. He could not help but start summoning. If he used normal summoning spells to summon the 4-star scabbard, it would take at least a minute. However, Dake often used normal summoning spells to summon Fairy Ibu, Diru Beast, and Big Milk Can in the dormitory. He was already quite familiar with it. After more than a minute, the summoning was successful. The Holy Sword version of the scabbard appeared in front of Dake and the magic elves. It floated in the air. The single eye in the middle of the scabbard slowly opened and intertwined with Dake's gaze. Dake did not think too much and immediately used Greed 2 to activate its intelligence. Under the light purple light, the Greed emblem appeared on the scabbard's scabbard. The eye in the middle of the emblem clearly showed the color of greed. However, Dake only smiled and ordered, "Scabbard, use weaponization." Under the master's command, the single eye of the scabbard instantly closed. The arm-like long ribbon at the end of the scabbard immediately retracted into the scabbard, leaving only a small end that connected to form a loop. It was just like the Holy Sword. Dake reached out slightly and held the scabbard in his hand. It was very light in his hand. Although the scabbard had turned into a weapon, it still retained its floating characteristics. Doc brandished the sword a few times and couldn't wait to put it back into the magic card. He then took a look at the card. Card name, Scabbard, Weapon. Item type, Item card. Effect 1. Grants the user an attack bonus of star level X 300. Effect 2. Additional passive, Holy. Effect 3. Additional passive, Holy Sword. Effect 4. Additional sure kill skill, Combo Slash. Effect 5. Additional killing move, Sword Dance. Effect 6. Additional sure kill skill, Sprite Transformation. It really turned into an equipment card of the item cards. Dake was overjoyed. He immediately tried to summon it using the usual summoning spell. But right after that, a huge suction force was suddenly emitted from the magic card. Dake frowned and took the initiative to pour in his magic power. After consuming a large amount of magic power, the scabbard, weapon, was finally summoned. Dake held it again and poured in his magic power to use the skill, Elvish. The scabbard, weapon, immediately turned into scabbard, elf. Although it consumed a lot of magic power, it only takes 3 seconds to summon a 4-star scabbard. After confirming this, Dake calmed down and continued to look at the other 3 skills of the scabbard. To be honest, the first impression that these 3 skills gave him was not good. The magic elves would increase the power of their skills when using their own skills. However, among the 4 skills of the scabbard, there was a total of 4 skills. Weaponization had no attributes. Combo slash was a bug-type skill. Sword dance and holy sword were both sure-kill skills of the fighter class. In other words, none of them were steel type or spirit type, so there was no bonus from their own type. This was not good for the magic elves to increase their combat power. However, at this point, he could only hope that the scabbard would receive its own skills after evolving. Dake looked carefully. Combo slash continuously. If the first combo slash successfully hits the opponent, the next attack will increase by 50% of the basic attack. It can be 3 consecutive slashes at most. If interrupted, it will be reset. Sword dance. Perform an intense battle dance to increase your aura and greatly increase your attack power. The higher the aura, the more the increase in attack power. The lowest increase in attack power is 50% and the highest is 100%. Holy sword. Sacred sword. On the basis of the original attribute restriction, the restriction against demons is increased by 100% and the restriction against dark attribute is increased by 50%. It has an additional lethal effect against demons. When attacking, it ignores the opponent's ability changes and will definitely hit. There is a small chance of ignoring defense and directly attacking. Ultimate skill, Holy Sword, has completely inherited the passive attributes of the Holy Sword. It just changed from a passive skill to an active ultimate skill. The Holy Sword's ultimate skill is not bad, but without the bonus from its own type, it will be slightly weaker. In comparison, the combination of combo slash and sword dance is a godly skill. Start with sword dance, increase your aura to the limit, and then release combo slash. If you succeed in 3 consecutive slashes, your attack power will be increased by 3 times. For this scabbard, with an attack power of 2200, once it starts to dance, it will be unstoppable. For this type of ultimate skill, it doesn't matter whether it has the bonus from its own type or not. If I can add the effect of Holy Sword, and combine the 3 into 1, then it will be a true Holy Sword. 1 slash for 6600, I'll teach you how to be an adult. Dake was enlightened. He then turned the scabbard into a weapon and delved deeper into its effects. Scabbard, weapon form, had many equipment effects. Effect 1 was obvious. Effect 2 and Effect 3 were additional attributes that the Holy Sword originally had. Effect 4 and Effect 5 gave the user the 2 buff skills, Combo Slash and Sword Dance. But as a weapon, the basic attack power of these 2 ultimate skills should be user's basic attack power x 300% plus weapon bonus. If the one holding this weapon was the Diru Beast, the Holy Ring of the Diru Beast was very special. The additional attributes it added could be considered the Diru Beast's basic attributes. Therefore, if the Diru Beast held the scabbard and used Sword Dance plus triple slash, the highest attack power could reach 2400 by 300% plus 1200 is equal to 8400. 1 slash for 8400. Although it's still not as good as a milk can, it's already extremely terrifying. And as the wielder's attributes become stronger, the attack power will also become stronger. Hiss, is this the magic guide fairy refined by the Holy Sword? I'm afraid it's even more terrifying than the average Holy Sword. I wonder if there's a hero limit? Dake raised the scabbard and waved it. Who wants to try? Meow. The Diru Beast spirit was lifted and it immediately raised its hand. When it saw the scabbard transform from a magic guide fairy into a weapon, it knew that its Holy Sword was back. At this time, it needed to test the sword. Meow. Suddenly, another meow came from behind it. Meow Meow, who had been waiting for a long time, suddenly jumped over. But when it arrived in front of Dake, it suddenly stopped and squeezed to the side of the Diru beast and obediently raised its hand. Looking at the white and grey cat, Dake thought for a while and handed the scabbard, weapon form, to Meow Meow. Meow Meow Meow. Meow Meow grabbed the sword and laughed out loud. In this scabbard, there was still its precious bead. Although the scabbard didn't have a shield before it evolved, there was still a part that belonged to it. After glancing at the Diru beast beside it, Meow Meow grabbed the scabbard and pulled it out. Clang! The sword left the scabbard. Dake took out Meowmo's magic guide card and carefully looked at it. Attack power increased by 900 points. Of course Meow Meow doesn't have the talent of a hero. Does this mean that the scabbard's weapon form is no longer restricted by the hero? Dake thought for a while and said, Meow Meow, try using your ultimate skill. Meow Meow looked up and asked, Meow? Dake said, infuse magic and you will feel it. You should have learned it already, right? Meow Meow immediately puffed up its chest and infused magic into the scabbard. With the Technique Master talent, it was very fast to learn this kind of small skill. When it was playing with the Shield Turtle Jade, it had already learned how to transmit magic. This was actually not difficult. When the other magic guide fairies had their own equipment, they should be able to learn it quickly. After Meow Meow infused magic into the scabbard, it received a feedback. There was a trace of excitement on its face. It grabbed the scabbard with both hands and lifted it up. Then it turned to face the empty space in the dormitory and shouted, Meow! As the meow rose, its aura suddenly increased and it stepped forward. With a slight rotation of its feet, wind blew out from the bottom of its feet. In a flash, it turned into a cyclone that wrapped around its body and then abruptly retracted into the sword. Meow! Meow Meow roared again and the scabbard that was wrapped in air slashed forward twice. Ding! Ding! By the second slash, its attack power had increased to the peak. It had reached 1,500 by 200% plus 3 times 300 is equal to 3,900 points. But after such a powerful slash, Meow Meow's little face fell instantly. Looks like it's an emasculated version. Dake learned from the magic guide card that Meow Meow's attack power had increased in an instant and immediately understood. He thought for a while and said, Meow Meow, give the sword to the Diru beast. Meow Meow unwillingly put the sword back into the scabbard and threw it to the Diru beast. The Diru beast that was originally standing there suddenly revealed a trace of joy. It took a step forward and firmly caught the scabbard. Then it pulled out the sword and poured magic into it. The sword that was only half pulled out suddenly lit up with a holy white light. The dream demon that was flying above Dake's head was illuminated by the holy light and immediately fled into the shadows behind the counter. When the scabbard was in the hands of the Diru beast, its aura was completely different. It was as if it was now a true holy sword. Yes, this scabbard was clearly a holy sword. Only the Diru beast that had the talent of a hero could fully display its power. After the Diru beast pulled out the sword, it quietly waited for the cooldown of Combo Slash and Sword Dance. The cooldown of these two killing moves was not short. It could only be used once in a duel. Fine. Dake shook his head regretfully. No matter what, this magic guide refinement was a success. The holy sword, that could only be used by the Diru beast, could now be used by any magic guide elf. Although it couldn't display the passive properties of Holy Sword, and Combo Slash, and Sword Dance, could only display the lowest effects, it was still not weak. Moreover, under normal circumstances, the scabbard could move on its own. This was because when it was in its elf form, it could use any killing move. Dake only needed to hold the sword and not use it himself to cosplay as a hero. Of course, he wasn't interested in cosplaying as a hero. After Dake recorded the data while waiting for the scabbard's killing move to come off cooldown. Then he watched the Diru beast test the sword. The Diru beast's sword dance was clearly more beautiful than Meow Meow's. The aura it released was also on a completely different level. The sword dance was displayed to the limit. The triple slash it released under the guidance of the scabbard was also very smooth. It released 3 slashes like lightning. The last slash was even more shocking, leaving a terrifying sword mark on the wall. The Diru beast glanced back, and there was actually a trace of sword intent. This is... Dake couldn't help but narrow his eyes. He vaguely felt a trace of Yvette's scent on the Diru beast. This made him subconsciously ask, Diru beast, do you want to learn the sword? Diru beast, meow. He had to wait until the holidays to teach the Diru beast how to use the sword. Dake turned the scabbard back into its elf form and continued experimenting. Although the scabbard was already a 4-star magic guide elf of the 2nd tier, it was still a baby that could evolve twice. Using Great Sin 3 might allow it to evolve again. Dake tried Pride 3 and Bliss 3 one by one. The results were as expected. It really doesn't work? Looks like refining Greed 3 is imperative. 2 in 1 4,000 plus. Request for monthly votes. Chapter 364. The single scabbard had greatly increased Dake's strength. Even though the maximum damage it could achieve in the hands of the Dilu beast might not be as powerful as the milk can, the triple slash was much harder to hit than the 5 consecutive rolls. Therefore, it would definitely be more versatile. Moreover, it had a lot of potential for growth. Not only could it evolve, but the Dilu beast could also evolve. The Dilu beast and the Dilu beast fused and evolved into the Basti beast. It might not have the talent of a hero, but if it could evolve into a celestial beast, it would most likely have the talent of a hero. If the Dilu beast could learn some sword techniques from Yvette, then... In short, Dake had great expectations for the single scabbard and the Dilu beast's future. Alright, go and get to know your family. Dake patted the single scabbard that had just recovered from bliss, and handed it over to the Dilu beast. Remember, https://m Vipkanchu. VIP, a hero with a holy sword. These 2 magic guide fairies were destined to become the most intimate partners. The Dilu beast was secretly happy as it stretched out its hand. The single scabbard's satin ribbon, which was like a hand, wrapped around its wrist. This habit was quite similar to Fairy EV. However, the Dilu beast suddenly frowned and said, Are you absorbing Meow's magic? Sword. The single scabbard made a sound, expressing its confusion. The Dilu beast ignored it and turned to look at Dake, who was cleaning up the lab table. Dake patted his head and said, I almost forgot. The single scabbard does have the habit of absorbing energy from people. After all, it also has the ghost attribute and is the same type as the dream demon. Mimi, the dream demon, floated in front of him like a balloon and kept shaking its head. Dake helplessly patted its head and said, All right, I know you absorb fear. Then he turned to the single scabbard and said, Single scabbard, you are not allowed to absorb the Dilu beast's magic. Sword. The single scabbard suddenly became a bit depressed. It still didn't know whether this was good or bad. It probably just treated it as breathing. Adding on the influence of greed, its desire for what it wanted would be stronger than normal. However, he had no choice but to obey his master's orders. Although the scabbard was disappointed, it still reluctantly took back its ribbon. However, at this time, the Dilu beast suddenly grabbed its ribbon and frowned. You can suck it, but you have to get my permission first. Sword. Single sword scabbard's eyes lit up as he turned to look at Dake. Dake looked at the Dilu beast in surprise, waiting for its explanation. The Dilu beast concisely said, Paradise can provide it with the energy it needs. This meant that the scabbard could replenish its own mana consumption by absorbing its mana. This way, even if the scabbard wasn't in Paradise's records, it could still be kept outside. Unlike Meow Meow and the Dream Demon, once Dake went to sleep or was not in the dormitory, he would be recalled to the card. That's a good idea. Dake praised. Then, I'll leave the scabbard in your care. He immediately realized that the Dilu beast wanted to turn the scabbard into its own magic color. But he was actually happy to see it happen. After everything was settled, it was already 1 o'clock in the morning. Dake didn't do anything else and quickly went to sleep. The next morning, he woke up a little late, which was rare, so he didn't go to his morning exercise. A new week had arrived. After Monday's class ended, Dake went to the library with a goal in mind. He still had more than half of the materials he had on hand that hadn't been converted into battle power. Among them, he was most concerned about living metals. But according to his plan, he was going to refine a special weapon after the secret passage was reopened. Before that, his goal was to obtain the keycard and accumulate enough knowledge to refine it. Apart from that, the bloodthirsty great axe had already been given to Meow Meow as a replacement for the shield turtle jade. In fact, Dake hadn't learned how to turn magic tools into item cards, so he decided to leave it with Meow Meow. When he learned it, he could exchange it back. What was left was the lion's tooth, the magic crystal coin, and the 18-faced crystal. The lion's tooth was to be refined into a lion-type magic fairy, but there was no clue about the magic crystal coin. The only thing that could be refined at the moment was the 18-faced crystal. Dake's initial idea was to refine it into a dice with 18 attributes. As for what the final product would be, it didn't matter. According to Arvet's 3-in-1 weapon refining method, he had to refine the weapon himself. Dake wanted to try to make a high-level weapon, so he could gain some experience using living metals in the future. First, I have to find the magic symbols representing the 18 attributes. Then, I have to choose the materials of the 18 attributes that can be used to engrave the symbols. Finally, after half a day of hard work, Dake finally found a book called Explanation of Attribute Symbols in the library. He temporarily put aside other things and focused on studying this book, Explanation of Attribute Symbols. After 3 days, he finally had a certain understanding of the 20 attribute symbols, including light and darkness, as well as the meaning behind them. Although his understanding wasn't deep enough, this was as far as he could go. During this time, he took time to carve wood, and as his proficiency increased, his carving speed became faster and faster. On Thursday night, he spent a lot of time refining all the wood carvings into weapons. Although they were only at the same level as the moonlight dress, they were very helpful in increasing his proficiency in refining the weapons. There were a total of 13 magic elves. Apart from the already armed fairy Ibu and the Diru beast, he still needed to refine 11 more. After all, he couldn't favor one and discriminate against the other. Dake spent a lot of effort and finally refined these 11 wood carvings into weapons. Among them, Meow Meow's was a small shield that it had carved itself. Unfortunately, the small hole in the middle for the shield turtle jade could only be filled with magic crystal coins. Although the final product was at the level of the white fish hat, it could only be used as a toy. But looking at it, it was obviously very happy and proud. Dake was also happy. These 11 wood carvings cost him a total of 3 great sins. Among them, pride was 0. 8. Bliss was 0. 3. And greed was 0. 2. In addition, he had absorbed 2 pride and 2 greed in the past 4 nights. Remaining reserves frowny face pride, 8 bliss, 0 greed. 3. Although Dake was full of desire for greed 3, after careful calculation, he realized that no matter what, he wouldn't be able to gather the 10 points needed to refine greed 3 this month. Thus, he decided to accumulate pride to more than 7 points before accumulating greed. In this way, he had already drawn 8 times this month, and only had 2 more left. But in reality, Dake's great sins were already in short supply. Pride was only left with 96 points. Greed had already been reduced to the standard 95 points, and this was because greed had increased by 3 points during this period of time. In the remaining 2 days, if he wanted to continue drawing greed, he had to think of a way to increase greed. But sometimes, it was difficult to do it deliberately. As his mastery of great sins deepened, the situation of +1 became less and less. Dake couldn't help but fall into deep thought. What greed did he still need now? Greed for money and wealth? Stop joking. Then, greed for fame and power? Haha. After finding a way to use the great sin, Even his greed for the demon god bloodline extraction gradually faded. Sometimes, when he looked at his babies, he would even think that demon god bloodline is not bad. As for his greed for knowledge, that actually required some stimulation. He thought carefully. Sure enough, the desire to win was the easiest to stimulate. Then, let's aim to win the Easter Duel Festival. March 9th, Friday afternoon. Dake came to Travelers Street again. He needed to buy a lot of things this afternoon. In addition to the 18 attribute materials needed to refine the 18-sided dice, he also needed to buy the materials needed to brew chocolate. He hadn't forgotten the White and Green Festival on March 14th. There was still half a bottle of elven wine left at home, which could be used to make liqueur chocolate. It was just that there were more people who needed to return the gift. After a careful count, there were at least 5 people and 10 magic elves. This meant that he needed a total of 15 portions. The elven wine could be divided into 5 portions if used sparingly. As for the 10 portions for the magic elves, perhaps using milk grass juice to make milk chocolate might be a good idea. In short, when the time came, he still needed the magic elves who had experience before to teach him. Thinking that the magic elves actually knew how to give him chocolate on Valentine's Day on February 14th, he felt even more delighted. I feel like something good is going to happen today. With this thought in mind, Dake rushed into the cat flower shop before buying the materials. Today, Miss Cat was as simple and demure as ever. Surrounded by cats, she looked even more gentle. Good afternoon, Miss Cat. Dake took the initiative to speak. Miss Cat put down the cat plant in her arms and stood up. Good afternoon, Dimming. I thought you would come tomorrow. Dake, I happen to be free. Miss Cat said with a smile. Okay then. Did you bring the letter of instruction? Dake turned around and put down his backpack. He took out a letter of instruction and handed it over. Let me see. Miss Cat took the letter of instruction and opened it to read carefully. It's signed, Lily Laplace. Is he the professor of your arithmetic class? Dake nodded and said, yes. Can you take me to see the lion cub? Of course. Miss Cat folded the letter of instruction and stuffed it into her pocket. Then, she turned around and walked to her secret room. Dake didn't follow her this time. He only petted the cats outside for a while. Not long after, Miss Cat walked out with a metal cage covered with a coarse cloth. The metal cage shook unexpectedly violently. Low growls continued to come from inside. Seeing Dake look over, Miss Cat smiled shyly. You're a bit fierce. Dake laughed dryly. He finally understood the extent of the so-called bad habit of biting people. This lion grass probably bites people, right? If it was kept in a room, wouldn't it be torn apart in the blink of an eye? Huskies, and crazy people couldn't compare at all. If this lion grass is really used to cultivate the fruit of great sin, will there be a problem? Dake couldn't help but feel a little worried. If the fruit of great sin is used to cultivate magic elves, and the result is a snot beast or poop beast. After calming himself down, Dake bent down and lifted the coarse cloth covering the metal cage. The lion grass in the cage wasn't big. It looked like a lion cub without a mane. When the light shone into the cage, a stranger's figure appeared in front of it. The lion grass suddenly bared its teeth and barked wildly at Dake. It looked like a vicious dog with rabies. Be careful, don't get bitten, Miss Cat hurriedly reminded him. Dake estimated that if he got bitten, he might really get rabies. He nodded and became more careful. After observing for a while, he took out a happy card and used it on the lion grass. However, the lion grass that was hit by the happy card didn't calm down as he expected. He couldn't help but fall silent. Miss Cat said, "It's useless. Its problem lies in the simulation of its brain. It doesn't have an emotion sensor, so the emotion card won't work on it." This is difficult. Dake thought and said, "If I can't solve this problem, I can't keep a pet at home that bites everyone it sees. Is it really so difficult to improve this lion grass?" Miss Cat shrugged. "The main thing is that I can't find a breakthrough point. You know, Creative technology needs a constant stream of inspiration to support it. Dake couldn't help but frown. In fact, he thought of only using the lion grass once and returning it to the factory. However, if he sent it back to the factory for repair after cultivating the fruit of great sin, it was very likely that his secret would be exposed. This was obviously unwise. But if he abandoned it after using it, he wasn't the kind of person who would abandon it after using it. Let's try again. Dake took a deep breath and took out another Pride Eye. If Pride Eye couldn't suppress the lion grass's ferocity, then he could only give up for the time being. In the name of Dake Dim Eng, magic summoning. As the usual summoning spell was completed, a dark golden ball of light flew out from the card surface and drilled into the lion grass's head. At that moment, the lion grass's frantic barking stopped abruptly as it grabbed the iron cage. It was as if its whole body was frozen, and only after a long while did it roll its eyes and let out a suppressed bark. Although it didn't stop barking, it was obviously suppressing it. The hiss that leaked out from the corner of its mouth was still acceptable. Is this also an emotion card? Miss Cat couldn't help but ask in surprise. Sort of, Dake replied casually, and the knot in his heart gradually eased. How many credits does this lion grass cost? Miss Cat thought for a moment and gestured a number. 88. A pot of ordinary cat grass only cost 50 credits, so this lion grass cost 88 credits was reasonable. But Miss Cat immediately added, like the milk cow grass, the cat juice it requires is also a special magic potion, 30 credits per bottle. Of course, we will also provide after-sale service, and a 3-month warranty. 2-in-1 4200 plus. Delicious monthly ticket. Chapter 365. Pride Eye could actually work on the lion grass that had no emotional sensors. This was somewhat beyond Dake's expectations. But since this was the case, could it be deduced that the brain simulation of the lion grass wasn't as bad as imagined? Maybe I can make it normal through slow debugging. Dake immediately paid enough credits, then pulled up the coarse cloth again, patted the cage, and lifted it up. Although the lion grass was the size of a young lion, it was still heavy. Dake went out of the shop and changed into a small trailer. He first brought the lion grass back to Traveler Street, then summoned Meow Meow and let it carry the iron cage back to the dormitory. After that, he continued to shop. On Friday afternoon, there were always a lot of students in Traveler Street. But there were surprisingly few people who bought the ingredients for making chocolate. Students paid less attention to White and Green Man's Day than Valentine's Day, and it was rare to see someone return the gift of handmade chocolate. This situation was likely because they had already gone through a screening. First website. https://m. Vipkanchu. Vip in short, Dake quickly bought the ingredients and molds for making chocolate. Next, he began to choose the 18 attribute materials for refining the 18-sided dice. The selection of these 18 materials was actually quite knowledgeable. Dake once thought of simply using 18 attribute powders instead, but in the end, he decided to choose and grind it himself. After all, Arvet's triad armament formation was a triad of mind, magic, and armor. The more effort he put into making it, the higher the probability of success. But with this selection, it was already evening. Boss, wrap it up. After Dake selected the last material, he was slightly relieved. Then he bought a snack that was similar to a scallion pancake in Traveler Street and ate it as he walked. When the snack was finished, he was almost back to the castle. As the sky darkened, the sunset gradually receded, and a wisp of rain clouds floated over. Raindrops fell from the night sky. How lucky! Dake sighed and walked through the castle gate. Knock, knock, knock. Dake knocked on the door of his dormitory. After waiting for a while, the door to the dorm was opened from the inside. What appeared in front of Dake were 2 ribbon-like tentacles. He allowed the ribbon to wrap around his arm and said, "Open the door wider." Ibu opened the door, making it easier for Dake to enter. Immediately afterward, a series of ferocious howls came from the room, mixed with the howls of several other kitty grasses. Dake walked past the entrance and saw the lion grass still locked in the iron cage. But at this moment, Leisure grass seemed to be in a sorry state. Dake glanced at it and did not know whether to laugh or cry. It seemed that the lion grass immediately became ferocious after Pride's effect disappeared. Who knew who did this to it? Not only did he turn its body over so that its belly was facing up, but he also spread out its limbs and tied them to the four corners of the iron cage. He even stuffed its mouth with a plug. As a result, it could only whimper. There's really no other way. Dake did not care about the lion grass. Instead, he unloaded all the materials on the trailer and went to the bathroom to wash his hands. After he came out, he sat down to think of a solution. Of course, this could not go on forever. But the effect of the Great Sin card could only last for a short period of time. The cat grass was different from the magic elves. He could not use the Great Sin card to activate its intelligence. I've already stored 8 points of pride. Maybe I can cultivate a fruit first before making a plan? Dake thought carefully, but could not think of a solution at the moment. He had no choice but to make a decision. Let's do that. Its current position is just right for feeding. I can try feeding it 1 or 2 drops and see its reaction. Dake did as he said. He took out the magic brain dropper and went straight to the balcony to extract 1 point of pride from the insect branch. All this time, he had let the cat grass suck out Great Sin from the insect branch, but it was clearly impossible for the lion grass to do so in its current state. He could only force an injection. He returned to the room, reached into the cage, and raised the lion grass's head. Then, he pulled out the plug blocking its mouth slightly, revealing a hole for the magic brain dropper to be inserted. After that, he naturally inserted the tip of the magic brain dropper into the hole and squeezed the magic brain. As the drop of pride was squeezed into the lion grass's mouth, its body suddenly stiffened. It felt completely different from when the other cat grass absorbed Great Sin. Seeing that the lion grass stopped struggling, Dake could not help but hesitate. On one hand, this proved that directly dripping pride could affect its behavior. On the other hand, this also meant that there was an accident in the cultivation of the pride fruit. No one liked accidents. Let's observe for a while more. Thus, he temporarily gave up on the idea of cultivating the pride fruit in one go. After absorbing 1 point of pride, the lion grass really calmed down. Worried that it would suddenly go crazy, Dake did not remove its restraints. Instead, he continued to observe. While he was observing, he was also doing some work that didn't require too much concentration. For example, grinding materials into powder. That night, Dake spent the entire night grinding 18 materials into powder and putting them into 18 small bottles. At this time, the lion grass was still very quiet, as if it had fallen into a deep sleep. However, the lion grass's eyes were not closed. It would blink a few times from time to time. Dake could not figure out the logic behind it, so he simply went to bed after extracting Great Sin for the day. Because pride was enough for the time being, greed was not enough, and bliss was still above 100, he chose to extract bliss tonight. The next day, Saturday, Dake immediately went to the iron cage when he woke up. The effect of pride seemed to have disappeared. The lion grass became fierce and crazy again, but its limbs were bound and the plug in its mouth restricted its performance. Dake frowned and thought for a long time. Then, he simply squeezed another 2 points of pride into its mouth. Under normal circumstances, 3 points of Great Sin could cause a coat of arms to appear on the top of the lion grass's head and sprout. This meant that for a creature like the lion grass, 3 points of Great Sin might be a more critical quantity. In short, after these 2 points of pride entered its mouth, the lion grass quieted down again, and above its head, the coat of arms of pride gradually appeared. If one touched it carefully, they could feel a little bump in the middle of the coat of arms. It doesn't look abnormal. But there's no rush. Let's observe for another day. Today, let's try making chocolate first. Dake temporarily put down his thoughts and prepared to boil chocolate. Before this, he had never thought that he would one day have the chance to make chocolate with his own hands. However, the experience of making desserts with his own hands was actually quite good. It was just that the magic elves' desire to perform seemed a little strong. He did not know if it was because they were influenced by their environment. They all showed their good teacher side. Dake had been letting them command him, and he was happy from beginning to end. However, the whole boiling process was quite smooth. The final chocolate was bitter with sweetness, just like the taste of life. In the end, Dake divided the chocolate into 15 portions, 5 liqueur chocolate, and 10 milk chocolate, and packaged them in gift boxes. "Don't worry, I'll give it to you on White Chocolate Festival." After dismissing the magic elves, Dake came to the iron cage again. It had been nearly 12 hours since the lion grass sprouted from the top of its head. In these 12 hours, the lion grass still seemed to be asleep, and it was so quiet that it made people go crazy. So much so that Dake did not dare to easily throw in pride again. Even though pride was a renewable resource, if he invested so much at once and it all went to waste, he would still be so heartbroken that he could not breathe. Wait a little longer. Dake suppressed his impulse. He always felt that the lion grass's half-asleep state was very likely digesting and absorbing. At this time, it would be unwise to forcibly inject more pride to accelerate the growth of the fruit. After calming down, Dake focused and began to make the 18-sided dice. The 18-sided crystal in his hands was very neat and did not require much polishing. The difficult part was the engraving of the attribute symbols. However, he first drew the symbols on the surface of the crystal with a pen, and with enough patience, the final product was very perfect. Phew! After letting out a light breath, Dake washed the 18-sided crystal under the tap, then used a small engraving tool to smooth out the burrs in the symbol engravings. Finally, he washed it again and wiped it clean. With this, the process of the crystal itself was completed. The next thing to do was to apply a special magic potion in the symbol engravings, then fill in the powder of the corresponding attribute, wipe off the overflowing parts, and let it dry naturally. The whole process seemed simple, but when it was completed, it was already late at night. Dake looked at the darkness outside the window, wiped his sweat, and prepared to continue. As the saying went, one had to strike while the iron was hot. Moreover, tomorrow was Sunday, so it would be fine even if he fell asleep in the wee hours. However, before he officially began refining, he went into the bathroom to take a shower, allowing his mind and body to gradually relax under the hot water and recover to a good state. After the shower, he drank a glass of special apple juice, and the drowsiness caused by the shower was immediately blown away, and he became energetic. At this time, it was already past midnight. Some of the magic elves had already obediently climbed into their small beds. As for the lion grass, it was still in a state of half awake. Dake picked up the 18-sided crystal on the table and looked at it carefully. This pitch-black crystal had a total of 18 sides, and each side was engraved with attribute symbols of different colors. As for the remaining light attribute and dark attribute, according to Dake's own understanding, the crystal itself was of the dark attribute, and it had inherited the demonic nature of the demon eye. Next, it's time to start refining. No, wait, why don't I use the light attribute powder and coat the surface of the black crystal with a layer of white? Although the 18-sided dice are not white, the first impression that the dice give people is still white. 18 plus 2, 20 attributes. It's perfect. Let's do it this way. Sometimes, inspiration always came in an instant. Dake also worked hard for this. About half an hour later, he used the pure white light attribute powder to coat the surface of the crystal. At this moment, when he picked it up again, it finally had the impression of a die. He couldn't help but smile. Ever since he came into contact with the 3-in-1 armament refinement, this should be his most diligent work. Next, let's start refining. Dake was already familiar with the steps of refining the 3-in-1 armament. First, he prepared the special potion with the illusion effect, Red Spider Lily. Then, he took a blank magic card and smeared Red Spider Lily evenly on it, adding some other supplementary materials to create the foundation. Half an hour later, he began to draw the Triad Armament Refinement Array. 10 minutes later, he began mind smelting. In other words, he had to inject mind power into the triad armament refinement array and turn it into mind furnace. For this, Dake had prepared 1 point of pride, 1 point of bliss, and 1 point of greed. Pride was of the light attribute. Bliss was of the dark attribute. Greed was a fusion potion. If these 3 great sins could be fused into one and cast into mind furnace, this refining would be considered a success. Therefore, he was very careful. As the 3 points of great sins were dripped into the glowing sphere of the triad armament refinement array, the sphere first turned white, then black, and finally, under the melting of greed, it turned into a mixture of black and white. The black and white light gradually lit up the bedroom. The last step. Dake's eyes focused. He picked up the empty bottle of elven wine and drank the last mouthful that he deliberately kept. As the elven wine flowed down his throat, mana gushed out like a fountain. He immediately put the completed 18-sided crystal into the mind furnace. Then, he pointed the magic pen at the top of the furnace and poured mana into it. As the mana was drained, the 18-sided crystal in the mind furnace was melted and absorbed as it spun. When it completely disappeared, Dake pressed the magic pen down, and the spherical mind furnace quickly shrunk into an extremely thick layer of light that covered the surface of the card. There was a rainbow light that kept mixing in the light, which showed that the internal reaction was still intense. But at this point, Dake had done everything he could. Next, he just had to wait quietly for the moment to receive the results. He calmed down. His expression was expectant, but he wasn't in a hurry. Although he put a lot of effort into making this 18-sided die, he didn't have a specific goal. Therefore, no matter what kind of equipment this 18-sided die would turn into, he wouldn't feel disappointed. This was called No Crab for Chicken. Card name, 18-sided die, temporary. Type, item card, effect. /omega / 2 in 14/100 plus. I wish everyone good luck in making money. I wish you all the best in making money. Chapter 366. After a full quarter of an hour, the magic card's interior finally stopped reacting. The layer of light on the surface had completely sunk into the magic card, and the appearance of an 18-sided die appeared on the surface of the card. As expected, it was a white die with 18 different colored symbols engraved on it. Dake reached out and picked up the magic card, and injected a bit of magic into it. The feedback from the magic card told him that the name of this magic card seemed to be Wishful Die. Card name, Wishful Die. Type, item card. Effect, throw the die once, and according to the attribute symbol that appears, it will randomly release a transformation type ultimate skill of the corresponding attribute. Transformational Sure Kill skill? Remember the website, Vipkanshu. Dake had an idea, and immediately used a normal summoning spell to summon it. The moment the die touched his hand, there was a faint cold feeling. He looked around. Other than the dream demon floating above his head, the other magic elves were either lying on the small bed or peeking their heads out from the end of the big bed. The rows of magic elves were very pleasing. Thus, he immediately threw the wishful die into the air, and chanted, Wishful, wishful, according to my will, hurry up and manifest. The wishful die spun in the air, and the attribute symbols on the 18 sides lit up one after another. White light and black light intertwined, and the 18 colors spun and shone like a colorful neon light. When it hurriedly stopped, other than the symbol on the side facing up that was still lit up, the symbols on the other sides were extinguished one by one. The last remaining attribute was normal type? In Doc's mind, a few general transformation type sure kill skills immediately appeared. The so-called transformation type ultimate skills usually referred to those ultimate skills that could not directly cause damage. The power of these ultimate skills were all 0, although some transformation type ultimate skills could indirectly cause damage to the opponent by inflicting an abnormal status. Transformation type ultimate skills generally included but were not limited to changing the opponent's or his own ability value, inflicting an abnormal status or status change on the opponent, recovering one's own stamina, changing the weather, changing the state of the field, and removing the abnormal status of oneself and the team. For example, Ivan's imitation and Big Milk Can's round transformation were both sure kill skills of the general type. After the wishful die selected its attribute, Dake immediately felt his mana draining away. This was basically a characteristic of the armed card, so he was not too surprised. What surprised him was that after absorbing a lot of magic power, the wishful die exploded into a cloud of smoke with a bang. When he looked again, he saw that a tiny magic guide sprite had actually emerged from the smoke. Even though the magical fairy was only the size of a palm, it was still a blurry form. Even so, Dake recognized him immediately. Gungue or Pai Keisai? Immediately after, an extremely ominous premonition arose in his heart. The blurry black figure within the fog suddenly turned around, and a white light shot out from within the fog. Dake only had time to wave his hand to block it before the white light enveloped his entire body. It wasn't until this moment that the name of a transformation-type sure-kill skill appeared in his mind due to the feedback of the magic power, but it was already too late. Shrink. By the time Dake reacted, he had already turned into a tiny person the size of a palm. Even though his strength did not shrink, it was compressed into his body along with his body. However, the sudden change in his surroundings still made him feel flustered. This was especially true when he saw the magic elves burrowing out from under the blankets with their large, glowing eyes and a strong sense of curiosity. Dake suddenly realized. It was over. Stop licking, if you keep licking, it'll all be wet. Dake's face darkened as he endured the attacks of the magical fairies' tongues. He swore to himself that once he returned to his original state, he would definitely rub all of them bald. Shrink your body to greatly increase your dodging rate. The shrink state did not last for too long. After only a minute and a half, Dake felt the surge of magic power, and his entire body rapidly grew, quickly returning to his original state. He picked up Ivan, the fairy who licked the most fiercely, and began to rub it fiercely. Hot suit, the sound of spring echoed in the long night. After Dake finished rubbing it, he casually tossed Ivan onto the bed. He then picked up the Wishful Dice magic card again and inserted magic power to continue studying it. After the Wishful Dice was used once, the surface of the card turned grayish-white. After that, it would need to be replenished like a magical fairy card. After the magic power was replenished, it would need to wait for a certain amount of time before it could be used again. This time, it would take at least half an hour. Otherwise, it would cause damage to the magic card. The more frequently it was used, the more serious the damage would be. A very interesting armed card, it can create a miracle at a crucial moment. Dake looked at it for a long time and suddenly realized, even if that's the case, it's actually a watered-down version of the finger swing, right? Finger swing. Wave your finger to stimulate your brain, randomly choose one of all the sure kill skills and use it. But it's fine. Limiting the sure kill transformation type sure kill skills actually makes it more useful than the finger swing. At least there won't be any particularly serious consequences when it backfires. It can also make the duel more interesting. Let me think, do I really have to use it in the duel? Why do I feel like I'm courting death? Ha. Because this question was too serious, Dake decided to think about it tomorrow. He used the fastest speed to clean up the remnants of the experiment, took notes, and used the magical brain dropper to extract the last drop of Great Sin of the month. Then, he got into bed. Tonight, he drew the bliss again. Sunday morning. Dake woke up to the barking of the lion grass. He opened his eyes, pushed away the meaty pad on his face, and turned his head to see the lion grass whimpering. Although the cork in its mouth was still firm, it was still desperately making noises to express its protest. However, from the extent of its struggle, it was obvious that it was no longer as crazy as yesterday. Dake had an idea. He lifted the blanket, walked to the front of the iron cage, and scratched the lion grass's meaty pad. Its front paw suddenly retracted. Of course, it couldn't retract. It can't really be normal, right? Great Sin can be used like this? Dake thought for a moment and pulled out the cork in its mouth. But as soon as the cork was pulled out, the lion grass roared again. However, from the sound, one could tell that this kind of howl was obviously less frenzied. It feels feasible. Dake couldn't help but smile, and then put the cork back in. The main reason why he didn't immediately release the lion grass's restraint was to protect the bud on its head. Next, Dake used the magical brain dropper to extract 2 pride from the insect branch and inserted it through the corner of the lion grass's mouth, squeezing the pride in. With the 2 pride in its stomach, the lion grass fell into a half-asleep state again. It gave the feeling that its brain was obviously affected by pride, and at this moment, it was turning positive little by little. The buds on the top of its head were also developing normally, gradually growing into flower buds. It seems that at night, I can probably inject the last 2 pride points. At that time, I'll pick the pride fruit and continue to treat it with other great sins. Maybe I can really treat its brain. Seeing that he had an idea of how to deal with the lion grass, Dake's heart was suddenly enlightened. During the day, he asked the magic elves to bring the other 4 cat grasses to the flower bed outside the castle, and at the same time, he improved his relationship with the new dragon grass. Now that there were 5 cat grasses at home, the monthly cost of the cat juice magic potion was not cheap, not to mention the time and energy spent on it. Fortunately, there was Big Milk Can to take care of the cat grasses, so Dake could be so relaxed. The lion grass digested and absorbed the effect of pride faster than expected. In the evening, it became active again. After Dake confirmed that it became more normal, he injected the last 2 pride points into its mouth. A few minutes later, a dark golden fruit of pride bloomed on its head, which had been facing downwards all the time. Dake carefully picked this somewhat special pride fruit, thinking about whether he should immediately start refining a lion-type magic elven, but suddenly, he found that the lion grass froze again. This time, it looked like it had lost its soul, becoming very dull, and it couldn't help but worry. Fortunately, this dullness didn't last long. A few minutes later, the lion grass's eyes became lively. It was a lively gaze that Dake had never seen since he bought it from the cat flower shop. It seemed that its madness had been completely uprooted after the pride fruit was picked, and it completely disappeared. This phenomenon was too obvious. Doc looked back and forth between the fruit of pride and the lion grass in his hand. His originally relaxed state of mind suddenly sank. Could it be that this pride fruit absorbed the factor that caused the lion grass to go crazy during its growth? Then, does this pride fruit contain the factor of madness? Although Dake thought of this, he couldn't prove it. He placed the pride fruit on the table and tried to inject magic to feel it, but he didn't feel any difference. Should I release it? Until the little demon landed beside him, pointed at the lion grass and said so. Dake came back to his senses. Let it out, and take good care of it. Okay. The little demonic beast immediately flew to the iron cage and released the pitiful lion grass from the cage. Meow, 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 roar. The other 4 cat grasses carefully came over as if they were welcoming a new companion. The lion grass shook its head and immediately went into the circle of its companions. The atmosphere in the bedroom gradually became cheerful. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. I can't just leave it there and not use it. Isn't the purpose of the experiment to verify the truth? After half an hour of thinking, Dake finally made a decision. He immediately began to prepare the experimental equipment in an orderly manner. There was still plenty of time tonight, and it was completely enough to refine a magic guide elf. He had already carefully thought about the upcoming experiment in the past 2 days. The refining method is bird-beast species, light attribute. The core materials are pride fruit and lion tooth. The fruit of great sin has always been in a supporting position in this kind of refining. What needs to be prepared are elf me juice, brain lobe essence water, active egg liquid, light attribute powder. Basically, the refining process is the same as refining the Diru beast. The initial target is the symbol of the sun crown beast. Even though he was very familiar with this kind of experiment, Dake was still very cautious. When a blank magic guide card was refined to a semi-finished level, He paused for a moment and selected a bottle of powder from the experimental materials and temporarily made a bottle of ink. The bottle of powder was made using the key material of a lion-type monster after dehydration and grinding. It contained the genes of a lion, and using it to draw the refining array number 1, it could better guide the refining results to the lion. So far, everything was going smoothly. However, during the process of the experiment, Dake had been a little worried. The crazy genes that might exist in the pride fruit made him feel uneasy. Don't be distracted. After soaking the tip of the magic pen in the lion ink for a few minutes, Dake warned himself not to think too much. He waited until he completely calmed down before he began to draw the refining array number 1. Awoo! The sound of the lion grass and the other cat grass playing made his whole body tremble, and he almost wasted all his previous efforts. Fortunately, his right hand holding the pen was still as steady as a rock. After he abruptly finished, the refining array number 1 was drawn. He activated the refining array number 1 according to the plan, then added some saliva and other supplementary materials. Then, he poured the most important pride fruit, the fermented juice, into the refining array for refining. Finally, it was the lion's fang that he opened from the treasure chest. Dake actually didn't know much about the quality of the lion's fang. It could be higher quality than the two-headed devil, or it could be lower. Most of the time, one couldn't judge the true value of an item from its surface. But no matter what, since the experiment had reached this step, there was no turning back. He let go of his hand and let the lion's fang fall into the light array. Beep! Ripples spread out in circles, as if the possibilities were constantly expanding. This time, the refining of the magic guide card did not fail, at least on the surface. Dake waited for the magic guide card to form a light cocoon, and after 3 minutes, he used a mercury knife to cut it open. A mud-like liquid mixture overflowed from the light cocoon. He used tweezers to pinch the magic guide card out, rinsed it, and put it back on the clean table. Then, he looked at the surface of the magic guide card. Not the Sun Crown Beast. 2 in 1/4 out of 100. Requesting monthly votes. There are only a few days left for the bounty, heh. Chapter 367. The basic refinement method was a very random refinement method. Even if the range was limited to a small theoretical range through the choice of materials, it did not mean that there would not be accidents. If everything came true every time, wouldn't it be too easy to refine the magic? Dake could not help but feel disappointed that the refinement did not go straight to the goal this time. However, he was not surprised. He knew his limits. His success rate in refining the magic fairy was already unbelievably high. This kind of magical luck was already something that others could only wish for. Moreover, the quality of the magic elf cards refined every time was extremely high. The magic fairy card refined this time was also of high quality. Card name: Lion Beast. Memorize in 1 second. https://m. Vipkanchu. VIP. Type: Fairy card. Level: Race: Bird Beast. Attribute: Fighting System. Magic Power: 2300. Attack: 2300. Defense: 2300. Ultimate Skills: Beast King Fist, Lion King Pill, Righteous Heart. 5-star Magic Fairy, Lion Beast. The Magic Fairy refined with the Bird Beast type, light attribute, basic refinement method is actually a fighting system. After all, it's a basic refinement method. It's the bucket waste magic attack and defense again. Magic attack and defense are both 2300. It's actually not weak among the 5-star Magic Fairies, but it depends on who it's compared to. As an orange card, the 3 ultimate skills are not bad, especially this Righteous Heart. Dake suddenly sat up straight. This Lion Beast's ultimate skill really gave him a big surprise. Beast King Fist. The Lion Beast's ultimate skill. It releases a lion-shaped energy wave from its right hand to end the enemy. Lion King Pill. The Lion Beast rarely pulls out its ancestral demon blade, the Lion King Pill, with its own will. Intelligence decreases. Attack plus 500. Righteous Heart. The Lion Beast has a strong will and a righteous heart. It is a noble warrior. When facing evil, it can erupt with unimaginable power. As a famous digital beast in the Digimon series, Lion Beast has a very positive image and always gives people a very reliable impression. Especially when it used the Beast King Fist, it was so majestic and domineering that it left a deep impression in everyone's mind. As for the demonic blade Lion King Pill on its waist, its presence was extremely low. Perhaps the side effect of lowered rationality was not a joke. Could it be that the crazy factor is used here? But just this one factor? Dake shook his head. His main focus was still on Heart of Justice. Punishing evil and upholding justice. There was no doubt that this was in the category of mind power. Moreover, its other meaning was almost directly written on the surface. Dake immediately decided to summon the Lion Beast to take a look. However, the Lion Beast was a 5-star magic guide spirit. Using ordinary summoning spells to summon a 5-star magic guide spirit would take at least 10 minutes. For those who weren't proficient enough and didn't have enough talent, the time needed was even longer. If he didn't use the usual summoning spells, he would need 2 offerings. The magic guide spirit that was sacrificed would take at least half an hour to be summoned again. It really wasn't worth it. 10 minutes it is. I can't let my baby suffer. Dake finally sighed and began to use the usual summoning spell. In the end, he used a full 20 minutes to successfully summon this 5-star magic guide spirit. This was his first time using it smoothly because of his extraordinary talent. Seeing that the robust Lion Beast gradually materialized in the light of summoning, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. A magic guide spirit that was refined using the Fruit of Pride was born with intelligence. As soon as the Lion Beast appeared, it knelt down on one knee, raised its head slightly, and asked in a solemn tone, "Are you my master?" Dake couldn't help but reach out his hand. "Hello, Lion Beast. From now on, please take care of me." The Lion Beast's stern face relaxed, and it also responded with a smile. "It is an honor to be able to serve you. I hereby swear that I will use this body, this life, and this blade to protect my master." This was the first time Dake had encountered such a formal first meeting. He couldn't help but grab the Lion Beast's gentle and strong hand and pull it up. The moment it stood up, all his doubts about the Lion Beast completely disappeared. The Lion Beast stood upright, tall and mighty. Its lion face was domineering, but its eyes were filled with gentleness. One look and you could tell that it was an expert at taking care of children. After some time, when the last piece of the puzzle was completed, he would appoint it as the kindergarten class monitor of the Aristocrat House 201. The Lion Beast clearly saw the trust in Dake's eyes, and its gaze became gentler. "Let's give it a try." Dake sized it up for a moment, then summoned the single scabbard. The single scabbard loosened the ribbon around the Dilu Beast and slowly floated over. In these 2 days, the single scabbard and the Dilu Beast were inseparable, as if the Dilu Beast was its master. Relying on the magic provided by the Dilu Beast, it was able to constantly wander around the bedroom. The Dilu Beast even carefully taught it how to read, and the 2 magical guiding spirits became more and more intimate. Weapon transformation. Under Dake's command, the single scabbard transformed into a weapon in the blink of an eye and steadily flew into his hand. Dake casually drew a flower with the sword and tossed it to the Lion Beast. "Try it. Can you use it?" The Lion Beast opened its large hand and grabbed the sword hilt. It clearly had the ability to use swords and sabers. The length of the single scabbard was about the same as its Lion King Pill, and it could be said that it was quite easy to use. Clang! A soft sound rang out. The sword was unsheathed. The Lion Beast waved the sword, and the blade emitted a holy white light. Although it wasn't as good as the Dilu Beast, it could clearly use this holy sword. As expected, it has the potential to be a hero. The Lion Beast's attack power of 2300 is slightly lower than the Dilu Beast's 2400, but its star level advantage allows it to increase its attack power by 300 when using the holy sword. Its strongest attack is also 8400. Dake quickly calculated in his mind and revealed a smile. The appearance of a second hero candidate increased the strength of his deck by another level. This gave him even more confidence in winning the Easter Duel Festival. However, when the Dilu Beast discovered that the Lion Beast could also trigger the Holy Sword, it frowned and clearly felt a trace of displeasure. That feeling was as if a toy had been taken away. Displeasure. Meow meow meow. For some reason, Meow Meow's laughter was filled with joy. It jumped down from the cat tree and hopped to the front of the Lion Beast, meowing at it non-stop. The Lion Beast had a puzzled expression. Dake couldn't help but cover his face. In just a short while, Meow Meow sat on the Lion Beast's broad and sturdy shoulders. It looked down at the magic guide fairies in the bedroom with a proud expression. Although the two magic guide fairies had a language barrier, the single scabbard seemed to be the fetter that tied them together. Of course, they also had another fetter. Although Dake's dormitory was very spacious, it wasn't enough for a big guy like the Lion Beast to exercise its muscles and bones. Before the second year applied to the club classroom, it was likely that it could only become the guardian of the magic guide card like Meow Meow. This was probably the guardian's fetter. After verifying the Lion Beast's hero potential, Dake called back the single scabbard and ordered it to turn into an elf. In the end, the elf scabbard chose the Dilu Beast, which made the Dilu Beast's expression slightly relax. After that, Dake gathered the magic guide fairies together and explained the rules and regulations of the dormitory. The Lion Beast listened very seriously. It sat on the ground and naturally emitted an affinity. A few catnip plants, especially the lion plant, liked to stay close to it. It put the lion plant in the crook of its leg and gently stroked it like a cat. The atmosphere was very harmonious. Dake thought for a moment and didn't tell it about the seniority between it and the lion plant. On the other hand, the little devil laughed very mischievously. Taking advantage of the suitable atmosphere, Dake picked up the picture book and told a few short stories that were educational and entertaining. As the story was told, the Lion Beast gradually integrated into the group. It sat upright, like a well-mannered child. At this time, Dake realized that although the Lion Beast looked mature and steady, it was still a newborn baby. There was still a long way to go before it truly matured. Although the magic guide fairies had a certain framework when they were born, the influence of the nurture couldn't be underestimated. In the end, Dake looked at the Dilu Beast and asked the little devil to teach the Lion Beast how to read and write. As for the bed at home, because he had prepared small beds for the magic guide fairies, it was a pity that there was no bed for it at the moment. It could only be assigned a cabinet to store its personal belongings. Fortunately, the Lion Beast didn't need it. As the number of magic guide fairies increased, the lack of space in the dormitory became more and more obvious. Single scabbard, wishful dice, Lion Beast. All that's left is the bloodthirsty great axe and the living metal. The rewards from this underground adventure are almost finished. Next, I need to find time to master their abilities. Halfway through the long night, after Dake kept the dream demon, Meow Meow, and the Lion Beast back into the magic guide card, he could finally sleep peacefully. In order to take care of the three magic guide fairies' emotions, Dake even made 3 shelves and placed their magic guide cards on the table. If they didn't want to take the initiative to hibernate, they could also look outside through the card. Meow Meow was already used to this method. It simply treated the magic guide card as its own bedroom. Every night, after being kept back into the card, it would immediately hibernate. It was completely unaffected. As for the Lion Beast, it was a newcomer after all. It was curious about this world that it had come into contact with for the first time. Under the circumstances where no one was looking, it kept turning its vision within the frame of the magic guide card, trying to observe the movements of the entire bedroom. Then, it naturally saw the cold and arrogant white cat come down from the bed and crawl into its master's bedding. Hiss! Looking at the white cat's smooth and easy movements, the Lion Beast was sure that it must have gone through a lot of training. After crawling into the bed, the Dilu Beast stuffed the single scabbard in its hand into the bed. The Lion Beast looked at the Holy Sword and sighed. It still liked its demon blade Lion King pill, but the negative effect of lowering one's rationality was too much. Furthermore, the Holy Sword gave him a very good feeling. If it wasn't a latecomer, it would definitely fight for it. What a pity. The lion beast sat cross-legged in the magic guide card and squinted its eyes. But then, it suddenly noticed that there was movement in the magic guide card beside it. Then, its eyes bulged and it saw the dark green magic guide fairy crawling out of the magic guide card very naturally. It couldn't help but reach out and touch it. But the invisible wall that appeared in front of its fingers made it realize that not everyone could break through this wall. Its name seems to be the Dream Demon. How did it do it? When the lion beast's eyes twitched, it saw the Dream Demon stick to its magic guide card, covering the entire window. It frowned and tried to communicate with the Dream Demon to make it move away through friendly communication. But its voice couldn't break through the barrier of the magic guide card. And after a while, the Dream Demon floated to the side. But before the lion beast could breathe a sigh of relief, the Dream Demon floated back and completely blocked the light. After a few repetitions, the lion beast knew that it was being teased. Until the Dream Demon got tired of it, the lion beast regained its peace. Then, it saw the Dream Demon sneak out of the dormitory. A trace of envy suddenly emerged. What is the outside world like? The lion beast was full of yearning. March 12th, Monday. Dake slept until he woke up naturally. He immediately got up to observe the lion grass and found that it was sleeping peacefully. He couldn't help but feel relieved. As long as the lion grass remained normal, he could refine more lion-type magic guide fairies. In the long run, there would be a day when he successfully refined the sun-crowned beast. But the lunar god beast was still far away. He didn't know when the improvement of the rabbit grass would be completed. The rabbit grass and the lion grass had completely different problems. Although the lion grass was fierce, it could be raised. But the rabbit grass was so timid that it would be scared to death by a high decibel sound. That would be too fatal. Even if it was treated with great sin like the lion grass, the possibility of successfully curing it was very low. Dake pondered as he walked to the desk and awakened the 3 magic guide fairies in the magic guide card. During the day, he planned to summon these 3 magic guide fairies and let them learn on their own in the dormitory until their magic power reached a certain level, then he would recall them. Then, after school in the afternoon, he would return to the dormitory and summon them again. The magic power consumption of the 3 magic guide fairies had already exceeded Dake's current magic power recovery rate. It made it impossible for him to keep them outside. But as his magic power increased day by day, it was only a matter of time. Now he could only let them suffer for the time being. The sun set in the west. In the blink of an eye, it was evening. Dake sat down at the desk and prepared to write a paragraph for each chocolate used as a return gift to welcome the white-green day. 2 in 1 4,000 plus. Chapter 368. There was only one day left before White and Green Man's Day. During the day, Dake had already noticed that the students in the class were slightly restless. Especially those who gave out chocolates on Valentine's Day, they were all looking forward to a return gift. Even if they gave out righteous chocolates, if they received a gift in return, it would roughly mean that the other party didn't hate them. And those who had nothing to do with it were also quietly gossiping. The little magisters were always happy to talk about these kinds of emotional topics. However, White and Green Man's Day was actually a more serious topic for those who received chocolates on Valentine's Day, especially if they had a certain degree of affection for the person who gave the gift. Dake's current situation was like this. Moreover, his troubles were 5 times that of a normal person. Let's start with Professor Li. The reply to Professor Li was the easiest to write. After all, not only did Professor Li not express anything in words, but even the chocolates were fake. Dake felt that the fact that he could give her a gift in return was already out of consideration for their teacher-student relationship. After thinking for a while, he wrote on a card, "Don't drink so much." However, after writing this line of words, Dake suddenly realized that he had clearly given her liqueur chocolates, but he had written such high-sounding words. It was too much. Since he had already written it, so be it. Anyway, Professor Li wouldn't stop drinking because of this. Thus, Dake picked up the next card calmly. It was a pink card with cherry blossoms floating around. Dake had actually been hesitating whether to give Eudora a gift in return, but the refining of the single scabbard, was indeed thanks to her prophecy guidance. Speaking of prophecies, Dake pondered for a moment and immediately wrote, "I've learned something, and the future is promising." Writing such a thing on White and Green Man's return gift was really cool. After writing Eudora's card, Dake picked out Anna's card and drew a picture of a drooling bear eating chocolate. He then wrote, "Delicious," in the text bubble. When he put away the brush, Dake looked at the lively gluttonous bear and couldn't help but chuckle. Anna was such a happy person. Then, he picked out Luo's card and picked up a pen. But this time, he never put his pen to paper. In the end, just like how he drew Anna, he drew a rabbit lying on a crescent moon on the card. But after drawing this little rabbit, he felt that something was missing. After thinking for a long time, he drew a little bear next to the little rabbit. Later on, he simply added another cat on the other side. As a result, the entire composition was finally nearing completion. It was as if this was how it should be. Luo always thought that it was the existence of Dake and Anna that added color to her gray college life. But for Dake, didn't Luo and Anna also add color to him? If the two of them didn't take the initiative to get close to him, Dake, who had been under the pressure of great sin since the beginning of school and whose principle was to stay away from social interactions, might gradually become isolated and walk towards a completely different future. A person's psychological changes were greatly affected by the environment. Every friend on the road of growth was cherished. Dake inserted the drawn card into the chocolate gift box and took the last card in front of him. Sigh. Even though great sin had reached the point where the supply couldn't meet the demand. But his situation at the moment hadn't changed much. To put it in a more artistic way, he still had half a foot in the abyss. In the end, Dake casually wrote a sentence, "Rest more." Tuesday. On the day less than 24 hours before the White and White festival, the atmosphere in the classroom suddenly changed. The distance between the boy and the girl inexplicably increased. Dake didn't pay much attention to it at first, but when he packed his bag after school in the afternoon, he suddenly remembered that he hadn't talked to Anna for the whole day. This was even more shocking than the sky falling down on him. While he was in a daze, Dake saw Anna and Luo holding hands and hurriedly sneaking out of the classroom. Good fellow, this trick of deceiving oneself is really good. Dake smiled a little helplessly, and then went to the library as usual. There were 3 classes today: Dual, Arithmetic, and History of Magic. The Dual class didn't have much homework. The Arithmetic class didn't have to do homework. Instead, the History of Magic, which seemed to be the least homework, was always given homework that required a lot of time to search for information. But the process of searching for information was actually a process of learning. Dake came to the library, registered in front of Bella, and then went in to search for information. When he finished his homework and came out, it was already dinner time. The librarian behind the counter had been replaced by Panduola. Panduola was playing with the fat chinchilla, and when she saw Dake, she looked up and said, "You left so early today?" Dake nodded and said, "I just finished some work, and I'm going to go back and take out some books that I temporarily put aside to continue reading." Panduola joked, "How come every time I see you, you seem to be busier than me?" Dake shrugged and said, "I'm always resting in places that other people can't see." Panduola used a little bit of strength to stretch the chinchilla's cheeks and then let go, and said with a smile, "Shouldn't you be working in places that other people can't see?" Dake smiled and said, "What's wrong with that?" Panduola said, "That's true." After Dake registered, he resisted the urge to pinch the chinchilla's soft cheeks, and waved his hand and said, "Then, Senior, I'll go back first." Panduola also waved her hand and said, "Goodbye." However, after Dake took 2 steps, she shouted again, "Hey, don't forget my chocolate." After having dinner in the cafeteria, Dake returned to the dorm. Just as he said before, he was going to pick up some things that he had temporarily put aside, especially the research on Zoo. Zoo involved a lot of knowledge, and in the process of researching Zoo, his gains were gradually surpassing Zoo itself. He didn't know if it was because he hadn't seen it for a long time, but when he saw the same content again, he suddenly felt a sense of awkwardness that shouldn't have been there. Then, Some questions that he didn't have before popped up like bamboo shoots after a rain. This phenomenon not only didn't scare him off, but it also surprised him. He became more focused and began to solve the problems one by one. He gradually became fascinated. It was not until the clock struck 0 that the clock struck gently. Dake suddenly came back to his senses. He looked at the increased greed, and felt a little happy about the desire for knowledge that he had developed in the past 6 months. In the process of revisiting the old and learning the new, he found that his understanding of the zoo cultivation method had taken a big step forward. Maybe before the end of the semester, I can rely on my own strength to learn the zoo cultivation method. The fruit that could be picked after hard work was always sweeter than the fruit that was taken by hand. After sighing slightly, Dake looked up at the clock on the wall and realized that the time had passed from the 13th to the 14th. So, according to the plan, he picked up 3 of the 5 liqueur chocolates from the table and prepared to put them in front of the 3 girls' door in the middle of the night. This was not only to follow the example of Anna and Eudora, but also to avoid the awkwardness of returning the chocolates in the classroom. After all, his return gift was just a return gift, and didn't have much other meaning. However, when he took the chocolate and opened the door a crack, he suddenly noticed that there were people in the corridor in the middle of the night. No way. After sneaking a glance, Dake found that there were many people who had the same idea as him. Forget it, let's wait for the day. Am I the kind of person who sneaks around? Of course not. Dake adjusted his collar and prepared to change into his pajamas. At the same time, he glared at the magic guide elves who were peeking. After the magic guide elves retracted back into their blankets, he washed up and went to bed with his clothes on. 3:00 in the morning. Dake quietly opened his eyes and carefully pulled his arm out from under Fairy Evie's belly. He slipped out of the blankets bit by bit. Of course, he didn't do it to deliver the 3 liqueur chocolates to the 3 girls' door again. Instead, it was to secretly place the 10 milk chocolates that belonged to the magic guide elves at their bedside. The chocolate return gift from White Angel Green Day was supposed to be a surprise. However, he made the chocolates together with the magic guide elves, which was equivalent to robbing that surprise. Secretly placing the chocolates at their bedside at 3:00 in the morning was just to make up for it a little. He purely hoped that when they woke up, they would be a little happier because of it. After doing this series of things, Dake went back into the blankets. After leaving the blankets for a while, the warmth still hadn't dissipated. Dake burrowed into the blankets and couldn't help but sigh. Why does this White Angel Green Day feel like Christmas? The morning of the 14th of March wasn't too special. The sun rose as usual and the spring breeze was as cold as ever. When one burrowed out of the blankets, the cold wind would make one feel even more reluctant to leave the blankets. After Dake woke up, he blinked his eyes and suddenly noticed that Fairy Evie and the Delu beast had disappeared from his side. He sat up doubtfully and turned his head to look at the row of small beds by the wall. On the beds belonging to Fairy Evie and the Delu beast, the blankets were bulging. The 2 magic guide elves had burrowed back in at some point. When Dake made a sound because he had woken up, the magic guide elves opened their eyes one after another. Those hazy, sleepy eyes, the sounds of whimpers as if they had just woken up from a dream, and the sound of the blankets being lifted in unison. Then, in just a few seconds, the magic guide elves let out cries of pleasant surprise when they saw the chocolates by the bedside. In an instant, there were meows, moos, bustling noises, smacking noises. The entire bedroom was filled with the chaotic and unified cries. Looking at this clumsy scene, Dake's face was stupefied. Then, he got out of bed, washed up, changed his clothes, bound his book, pinned his card bag, took the chocolates, and pushed the door open. It was rare that he didn't eat breakfast in the dormitory. Meow Meow and the lion beast, who he had left out, squatted in the magic guide card and looked at the sky. Click. The moment the door was locked, the dormitory instantly quieted down. It was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop on the ground clearly. The magic guide elves looked at each other, their eyes filled with confusion and worry. After a long while, the little demon beast muttered, "Did we screw up?" Outside the door. After Dake went out, he didn't go far. Instead, he stopped at the door and touched the corners of his eyes. His fingertips were a little wet. He probably didn't dry them when he went out. The corners of his eyes were a little red. He probably woke up at 3 in the morning. Meow meow, Dake slapped Meow Meow, who had half of her head poked out of the door, back into the room and strode towards the stairs. It was rare for him to go to the cafeteria in the morning. If he didn't eat more, how could he face himself? When the halfling chefs saw him, they were all surprised. He greeted the chefs and went to the windowsill to order a steak, a fried egg, 2 slices of bread, a glass of milk, and 2 sausages. When the plump halfling aunt handed him a plate full of food, she gestured, "Wait a moment." With a trace of doubt, Doc put down the foot that he had lifted. After a while, the halfling aunt took out a copy of the Great Sage Daily, rolled it up, and put it on the side of his plate. Dake was stunned for a moment and quickly said, "Thank you, Auntie." "Don't mention it." The halfling aunt showed a kind smile. "Happy Valentine's Day." Dake found a seat in the corner of the cafeteria and sat down. He opened the Great Sage Daily on the side of the table and read it as usual. This was actually against etiquette. But what did it matter? One day, when more people did this, it would become etiquette. The headlines of this issue of the Great Sage Daily were indeed dominated by the White Festival of Youth. There seemed to be a wave of divination craze in the kingdom because of this. Men and women, in order to know in advance whether their confessions were accepted or not, looked for diviners everywhere before this day. The speculators who came after the stench of copper put on their black cloaks, held up their crystal balls, and turned into fortune-tellers. They received a huge fortune-telling fee and told the fortune-telling that would make their customers happy. This kind of craze happened once a year. Every year, on the day of the White Festival of Youth, all the diviners who suddenly appeared would disappear without a trace. But people still did it every year. This issue of the Great Sage Daily didn't have any profound events. Most of it was just gossip. Occasionally, it was mixed with some interesting anecdotes of the nobles and famous people, which made people laugh. But when Dake was halfway through his steak, he suddenly saw a piece of fake news in the corner of the newspaper. It is said that the eldest prince, Charles, is actively planning a blind date for the eldest princess, Elisha, in the name of her brother. Dake almost spat out the milk in his mouth. Charles has too much free time. But speaking of which, this is a wonderful way to break out of this situation. Do you think so too? A burst of fragrance suddenly hit his face. Dake slightly turned his head and saw Professor Mitya Bartholomew, who was always wearing the same clothes, sitting down in the empty seat next to him with a tray. Dake had to gather the newspaper to make room for her. "Good morning, Professor." "Good morning." 2 in 1 4,000 plus. Chapter 369. Midya sat down next to Dake and squinted at the news in the corner of the newspaper. It was obviously fabricated. She asked seriously, "What do you think of this news?" Dake didn't care. "It's a good idea, but it's also a bad idea." "Midya, huh?" Doc said, "Talking on paper is always shallow, knowing that this matter must be done personally. It's just a hot-headed idea. But from the princess's point of view, you can find out who sent the plan to the prince. After all, although it's useless, it's disgusting." Midya looked at him curiously. "I didn't expect you to have such an opinion in your first year. I really don't know how you got those rumors." Dake was a little embarrassed. "I'm young and ignorant." Midya smiled and didn't say anything else. She turned her attention back to her plate. She cut the bacon into small pieces and chewed it carefully. After a while, she looked up and said, "Easter is coming." "Easter Sunday?" Remember the website, Vipkanshu. 6 today is White Day, right? Talking about Easter at the White Festival? Professor, you're taking too big a step. Dake thought in his heart, but he didn't say it out loud. Easter and April Fool's Day are on the same day this year? Professor Midya said, "Fools fool themselves, deceiving themselves and others. Do you know the origin of Easter?" Dake shook his head and said honestly, "I don't know." In his previous life, Easter was a Christian festival to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus on the 3rd day after his crucifixion. It was also known as Jesus Easter, Lord's Easter, and the resurrection of Jesus. However, this was the origin of Easter in this life. He didn't know about it. Professor Midya smiled and said, "I suggest you check it out yourself. It will leave a deeper impression on you." Then, she picked up her plate and left. Dark looked at her back, which made him unable to look at her directly, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Originally, even if Professor Midya skipped White Day and casually talked about Easter, it wouldn't be too big of a problem. After all, a leftover woman like Professor Midya would most likely deliberately ignore things like Valentine's Day. However, Professor Midya's identity as a prophet always covered her words with a layer of mystery. Did she do it on purpose? Easter? What did she know? And why did you mention it to me? Dake had a few more thoughts in his mind as he hastily finished the food on his plate and quickly left the cafeteria. Even though it was still early, he still went straight to the classroom for the first period. Today happened to be Wednesday. There were 2 classes in the morning and no classes in the afternoon. In the evening, there was Professor Mitya's astronomy class. Perhaps this was the reason why she appeared in the cafeteria. Even though Dake stuffed the chocolate into his backpack, he still felt that it was inappropriate to return the gift in class, so he decided to wait until the morning class was over before looking at it. In between classes for potionology and summoning, the students were quietly discussing topics related to Valentine's Day. As the boy who received the most chocolates on Valentine's Day, Dake naturally received more attention and discussion. But he just sat there, unmoved. The boys and girls who wanted to watch a good show couldn't help but feel disappointed. After the whole morning, there really was a couple. However, it was said that the couple from the House of Fools were childhood sweethearts. Moreover, the 2 of them lived next door. It was impossible to be envious of someone who had won at the starting line. The students sighed and could only secretly hope that in a few years, they would be able to find someone they liked. Ring, ring, ring. While all kinds of thoughts were running through their minds, the bell for the second period of the morning suddenly rang. Professor Shi Erfu looked at the clock, quickly assigned homework, and left the classroom. The students also packed their bags and left. For them, every Wednesday afternoon was a small holiday. The astronomy class in the evening was mainly to cultivate their interests. Now that the class was over, they could have a good rest for a while. Dake remembered Professor Mitya's words and prepared to go to the library to look up information related to Easter. However, when he packed his books and took his bag out of the drawer, he suddenly noticed that D. Anna and Luo Si were still sitting in the front row. Usually, D. Anna would be waiting by the side with her bag. The corners of Dake's mouth quietly curled up. Then, he was not in a hurry. He just carried his bag and took 2 steps out. Seeing that D. Anna could no longer sit still, he took 2 more steps back. Then, he sat down again and looked forward with a smile. The people in the classroom slipped away and left. Soon, there were only a few people left. Dake looked over D. Anna's shoulder and saw Eudora N. Wei, who was also sitting in front of him, looking a little uneasy. Eudora's ears perked up as she listened nervously to the movements behind her. She observed the stars last night. A star was bright, indicating that she might be lucky today. Therefore, she had been secretly paying attention to Dake since the morning. Until now, there was finally a sign that something lucky was about to happen. Is it coming? She suddenly heard the sound of someone standing up at the back. She could not help but become more and more excited. Dake did stand up, but he did not leave his seat. Instead, he took out a chocolate gift box from his bag, raised his hand, leaned forward, and slowly lowered the chocolate gift box from above D. Anna's head. D. Anna suddenly noticed that something was blocking the light above. She looked up and saw the chocolate gift box. She suddenly widened her eyes, raised her hands, and slapped the chocolate gift box hard, trying to clamp the box. Swoosh! However, the gift box suddenly rose a distance. She had actually missed her target. In an instant, D. Anna's eyes flashed. 2 consecutive slaps. Pa! This crisp sound was extremely obvious in the empty classroom. Dake was prepared in advance. How could he be caught by her? Pa! 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 Another 3 consecutive slaps missed. Humph. Humph. Anna finally puffed up her cheeks and was unhappy. Dake quickly put down the chocolate gift box and stuffed it into her hand. Anna closed her fingers and immediately grabbed it. Her mouth was crooked with a smile. Haha. Luo-si half turned around and covered her mouth to snicker. Dake also took out her share and handed it over. When their gazes met, Luo-si's face revealed a shy expression. She quickly snatched the chocolate and turned back. Then, the 2 little girls quietly made a V under the table with their hands. Obviously, their goal of staying in the classroom had been achieved. After Dake gave their chocolates out, he also took out Eudora's box of chocolates. He walked out of his seat calmly, crossed the aisle, and came to Eudora's table. Then, he placed the chocolate gift box on the table and slowly pushed it over. When Eudora turned her head to look at him, he said, "Thank you." Although it was only a thank you, Eudora was already very excited. She raised her head and glanced at Dake's face. Then, she hurriedly lowered her head and quickly reached out to grab the chocolate gift box. She held it tightly. Dake sighed slightly in his heart. Then, he retracted his hand and returned. I hope Eudora can focus more on her studies after seeing the card. Especially the study of astrology, it is also very important to her. The remaining people in the classroom witnessed Dake's behavior throughout the whole process, but they couldn't smell the scumbag in it. Only a little fatty muttered in a low voice with a horrified face, "So scary. Is this the legendary Sea King?" Then, he was bumped by his deskmate and let out a short cry. After Dake returned to his seat, he invited Anna and Luo-si, lunch together? The 2 little girls resisted the urge to open the chocolate gift box on the spot and immediately stuffed it into their school bags. Anna seemed to suddenly come back to life. She said with a smile, "Let's go. My stomach is flat." Luo-si added, "I heard that there is chestnut cake today. If we are late, it will be too late." The 3 of them walked to the cafeteria as usual. Walking through the aisles of the old castle, there was always a feeling of time passing by on both sides. It seemed that after a moment, it would become a memory. It was not until after lunch that Dake said goodbye to the 2 and walked to Professor Li's office on the way. "Come in." After Dake knocked on the door and entered, he saw Professor Li lying on the table bitterly grading homework. He quickly put the chocolate gift box on the table and shouted, "Professor Li, I'll put it here." "Okay, Professor Li looked up suddenly and saw that Dake had half of his body out of the office. He hurriedly shouted, "Dake, don't go!" Bang! Dake closed the door without hesitation and silently wiped the sweat off his forehead. Good thing I reacted quickly. Otherwise, I would have died here this afternoon. He picked up his school bag and walked to the library. It was obvious that Professor Li did not remember the white and green day at all. He was happy to be able to relax. When Dake arrived at the library, he found that Panduola was not behind the counter. He quickly registered his class name and walked into the library. As for the last piece of chocolate, he would give it to her when she came to work. Dake did not forget his other purpose of coming to the library. He found the area marked with "Festival" on the library floor plan and quickly walked over. After spending a cup of coffee, he finally found a book that recorded information about Easter. The bookshelves were densely packed with books about Easter customs, Easter rituals, and Easter heroes. In short, it had almost everything that one could think of. Dake looked for a while and finally picked out a book called Easter, the Revelation. In this world where the gods did exist, the meaning of each festival was far more profound than what ordinary people could imagine. Whether it was Halloween, Christmas, or this Easter, it was all so. The origin of the festivals was far more complicated than what people thought it was. Dake leaned against the bookshelf and carefully read for a while. He took the book to the reading room and flipped through it in his usual seat. The author of Easter, the Revelation, was the saint, which meant that it was most likely written by the saint team. Of course, it was also possible that the saint took away the authorship of the real author. In short, the content of the book leaned towards the teachings of the saint. It was just like how they preached that Christmas was the birthday of the saint. This Easter was also known as the resurrection day of the saint. But it was different from the story of Jesus' resurrection. No one could nail the saint on the cross. That was impossible. It was not allowed. The saint was one of the oldest gods and the first human described in the saints' canon. He was not even allowed to die. Since there was no death, there was no resurrection. So, how did Easter come about? Dake continued to read. The sound of his fingertips rubbing against the corner of the page was soft and fragmented. The saint was the first human. He was both a god and a human. Before his arrival, there was no human in the world. After his arrival, the first human appeared in the world, which was the saint himself. He was the beginning of human and the root of human. He was the ancestor of all human beings in the world. He had not died in the past, and he still existed now. The so-called resurrection was not resurrection from the dead, but resurrection in another concept. In order to protect human beings in the long river of time, the saint had sacrificed himself. This was a very important piece of propaganda for the saint. But he could not really sacrifice himself. So, he did not die, but he was divided into three. Perhaps the illusion here was still lousy, turning into three pure ones. After the sacrifice of the saint, he was divided into three fetuses. These three fetuses grew up healthily under the guidance of fate. One of them became the unparalleled hero, another became the omniscient sage, and the last one became the honorable emperor. When these three fetuses led human beings to glory and touched the peak of that era, the hero, the sage, and the emperor came to the place where the saint sacrificed himself at the same time. The three of them suddenly regained their memories while looking at each other. Then, they smiled at each other and merged into one. The saint, who had disappeared for decades, was resurrected again. And that day was also Easter. Why do I have an inexplicable sense of déjà vu? Dake closed the book and had a strange expression. Professor Midia specially asked me to find the source of Easter. Could it be that she wants to tell me that the Demon King, who has 7 equal parts, intends to merge into one during the upcoming Easter? Does she really think it's the King Kong Calabash Kid? Dake picked up the pen and knocked on the table. Then, he immediately denied it. Impossible, this is only the first grade. Besides, there's no news of the Demon King escaping from the seal. And I don't know if it's really divided into 7 parts like Voldemort in Harry Potter. What are you looking at? The voice that suddenly came to Dake's ears brought him back to reality. He subconsciously turned his head and saw Senior Panduola leaning forward with her hands behind her back. She looked at him with a sweet smile. 2 in 1 4,000 plus. Guaranteed free monthly votes and blades to cast. Chapter 370. It's nothing. Dake pointed at the title of the book and smiled. Isn't Easter coming soon? Check out the origins of Easter. Panduola glanced at the book and whispered, Easter? I wonder what's in the Easter egg this year? Dake, Easter egg. Yes. Panduola pulled out a chair and sat beside him. She propped her chin up and said, Every Easter, the Academy will give out Easter eggs in various ways. If you're lucky, you can even get a semi-finished magic card made by the professors. Dake was surprised. I thought the professors don't recommend students to use semi-finished magic cards? Panduola smiled. It's just some interesting semi-finished magic cards. The research value is much higher than the practical value. Dake nodded slightly and thought for a while. According to Professor Ka Zayer and Professor Shi Erfu's plan, they would give out the access cards as Easter eggs for the Easter Duel Festival. Before that, this information would only be inadvertently leaked through rumors. Dake tried to ask, Senior, do you know about the Easter Duel Festival? Panduola was slightly stunned. She then asked with interest, Are you saying that there's a duel competition this year? I think so. Dake nodded. I heard that the winner will get a valuable prize. Panduola thought for a while and said, since it's a duel on Easter, won't we have a chance to compete on the same stage? Dake scratched his head. I'm afraid not. I heard that there will be groups according to grade. That's a pity. Panduola was slightly disappointed. If it's too boring, I might not participate. Dake blinked and hinted, maybe there's a surprise in the prize. Panduola couldn't help but turn her head and laugh. Don't say here maybe. Can't you just tell me? Hey. Dake was a little helpless. He simply said, when the time comes, the professors will put a kind of access card in the winner's Easter egg. Those with access cards could freely enter and exit the secret passage. In addition, as a similar product to the branch card, the entrance card had many interesting functions. For example, the communication between card holders. Are you done? Panduola asked. Dake nodded. Yeah. Panduola shook his head. That's not something that can attract people. I don't have much interest in secret passages. Dake smiled. Then let's enjoy the festival. Panduola raised her hand and pointed her slender index finger at the corner of her mouth. I can cheer for you. She could tell that Dake would be participating in this duel festival. Dake didn't try to persuade him any further. He reached into the drawer and took out the box of chocolates for Panduola from his bag and placed it on the table. A gift in return. Panduola's lips curled up. She reached out and pointed at the box of chocolates. She asked softly, Can I expect a surprise? Dake thought for a moment and said, Maybe. Panduola complained, Can't you use a definite sentence? Dake. Then you can. Panduola blinked and shook the box of chocolates in her hand. When we go back tonight, I'll enjoy your surprise. Dake saw that she was about to get up and asked, Do you still have to work in the afternoon? No. Panduola shook her head. I have an experiment project to do today. I have to go. She got up and left, leaving behind a trace of her fragrance. Dake looked in the direction she left in for a while before he turned back to read Easter, Revelations, again. However, his attention was no longer on the book. So, she took time out to get the chocolates? After pondering for a while, Dake took Easter, Revelations to the counter and registered it. He then left the library. In any case, the chocolates had been returned. These external matters could finally come to an end. There was only half a month left before Easter. He still had a lot of preparations to do. Even though the rules for the Easter Duel Festival weren't out yet, since it was a school-wide competition, the rules were bound to be official. There were strict requirements for the number of magic cards that the contestants could bring. This meant that he would need at least 40 magic cards. The only thing he wasn't sure about was which level of magic balls would be used for the life barrier. The Magic Sphere's life barrier had 5 levels, and each level corresponded to 1,000, 2,000, 4,000, 8,000, and 16,000 mana points. The most formal competition that Doc had participated in so far was the previous rookie competition. However, that was only the second level, and the Life Enchantment Magic Ball only had a mana value of 2,000 points. Of course, the Easter Duel Festival this time wouldn't be a rookie competition. Considering that the first to third years were in one group, and the fourth to sixth years were in the other, the life barrier for the lower years would most likely be the third level of 4,000 magic points, while the upper years would be the fourth level of 8,000 magic points. Of course, it could also be the fourth level of 8,000 magic points. Dake didn't plan to ask Professor Ka-Zayer about this. He was looking forward to the changes in the competition and focused more on the long-range control of the magic balls. This Easter Duel Festival was a rare opportunity for the first years to compete with the third years. When fighting against the third years, it would inevitably involve the control and pulling of the magic balls. Normal third years wouldn't be like Angelia, who had no experience in dueling. How to control the magic balls to avoid the opponent's attacks, or even multitask, controlling the magic balls and summoning the magic spirits at the same time, or forcefully controlling the opponent's magic balls. All kinds of methods were endless. Especially in a competition like the Easter Duel Festival that was both entertainment and entertainment. There might even be people who deliberately put on a show. In short, just thinking about it made one look forward to it. While Dake was going back and forth between the library and the dormitory, the three girls who received Valentine's Day gifts immediately opened the chocolate gift box after returning to the dormitory. Eudora rushed back to the dormitory without even eating lunch. After she got into the bedroom, she put down her school bag and threw herself onto the bed. Her petite body sank into the quilt. Holding the chocolate gift box with a ribbon in front of her with both hands, Eudora chuckled, unable to contain her excitement. From inviting Dake to dance before Christmas and being rejected, to now receiving a Valentine's Day gift, this kind of leap made her addicted. Even though she knew in her heart that this wasn't a return gift in that sense, compared to the other girls who didn't even make a sound after giving chocolate on Valentine's Day, she was undoubtedly one of the lucky ones. This should be considered the first step, right? Eudora rubbed her cheek against the chocolate gift box. Her big eyes narrowed into two crescent moons. After the first step, it's the second step. She lay on the bed and opened the box of chocolates in a good mood. When the gift box was opened, the fragrance of chocolate mixed with the smell of fruit wafted out. Eudora sniffed closer and her eyes suddenly lit up. There's wine in it. The chocolate she gave Dake also had wine in it. This similarity made her suddenly feel like she was being acknowledged. Great. Eudora opened her pink lips, picked out a liquor-filled chocolate, and took a small bite. The chocolate mixed with a hint of fruity fragrance always felt much better than what she made herself. After licking the elven wine in the chocolate center, a blush quietly appeared on Eudora's face. At the same time, the magic power in her body was obviously active, making her feel comfortable all over. Surprise appeared in her eyes. What wine is this? After a while, she picked up the card in the box while savoring the aftertaste of the elven wine and looked at the words on it. You have succeeded in learning, and the future is promising. Dake dimming, gift. Eudora suddenly covered her cheeks, and her eyes were covered with a layer of hazy gauze. Come on, Eudora. On the other side. After having lunch with Dake, Anna and Luo-C playfully returned to the dormitory. After Luo-C put her school bag back in her dormitory, she came to Anna's dormitory. The two put the chocolate gift boxes they received on the table together and decided to open them together. Anna stared at the chocolate gift box and muttered, On Valentine's Day, if I hadn't met Eudora, I would have succeeded. So angry. Luo-C glanced away slightly awkwardly. She still hadn't told Anna that she was the first person Dake saw on Valentine's Day morning. Although that rumor must be fake. Well, it must be fake. Luo-C calmed down and said, Let's open it and see? I guess it's handmade chocolate. Anna laughed and said, I think so too. Dake is always so serious. Come, let's open it together. After saying that, the two opened the chocolate gift box at the same time. Placed in the box were liqueur chocolates in 3 rows of 9. There were even some fine lines on the surface of the chocolate. It's a bear pattern. Anna's eyes lit up, and she immediately picked up a chocolate and kept turning it. Luo-C also carefully picked up one and said, Mine is a rabbit pattern. Then she looked at the card in the box. But at the same time, Anna couldn't wait to stuff the chocolate into her mouth. She bit hard and bit off half of the chocolate, and the elven wine hidden inside suddenly leaked out. Woo! In a moment of desperation, Diana took a deep breath and sucked all the fairy wine into her mouth. It's wine. Her eyes lit up, and she immediately picked up the second chocolate. Luo-C, this is delicious. Quick, try it. Anna suppressed her surprise and turned to look at Luo-C, but she saw that Luo-C was staring at a card, and her eyes were trembling. Anna couldn't help but take a look. Reflected in her eyes was a cute composition of a bear, a rabbit, and a cat lying on a crescent moon, with their little feet exposed. For Anna, the delicious liqueur chocolates might be the best gift. But for Luo-C, this card might be the best. Luo-C felt like he had found a treasure, and he decided to take it back and frame it. After that, Anna also picked up her card. The gluttonous bear on the card made her face blush, and she gave up and took another bite of the liqueur chocolates. Then she glanced at Luo-C's liqueur chocolates. 7:30 p.m. The students of the 4 branches once again came to the top of the spiral clock tower, and they sat in the classroom, waiting for the arrival of Professor Midya. The love divination on Valentine's Day left a deep impression on the students. Today was White and Green Day, and the little mages wanted to do it again. But Professor Midya, who came on the pumpkin carriage, didn't do as they wished this time. She only picked some love stories related to the galaxy, and taught some philosophy in the form of stories, and then briefly talked about tarot card divination. Tarot cards was a very common divination tool. In the streets and alleys, people could often be seen using tarot cards for divination. Of course, 999% of them were liars. The profoundness of tarot card divination was unimaginable for beginners. Even Professor Midya didn't dare to say that she was proficient in tarot card divination. But as teaching materials, it was easy to arouse the interest of the students. After all, who didn't like to play cards? At least, little Ivan's eyes lit up, and it would softly cry a few times from time to time. Dake knew that he should buy it a deck of tarot cards. During the entire class, Professor Midya didn't mention anything related to Easter. Dake specifically asked after class, but Professor Midya just smiled and didn't say anything. She looked like she was saying, "Think about it yourself." "I'll think about it." So Dake directly threw this matter to the back of his mind. After all, he wasn't worried that anything would really happen to Easter. Even if something did happen, it had nothing to do with him. The morning after White and Green Day, Professor Zayer called Dake to his office at the end of the second class. Then, he tidied up a little and brought him to Shi Erfu's office. When they entered the office, Professor Zayer casually threw a magic card to Dake. "The door card is done?" Dake casually asked and picked up the magic card to carefully examine it. This magic card had a faint golden halo, and it had a very familiar feeling of a gold card. But of course, it wasn't a gold card. Dake's heart skipped a beat, and he asked, "Professor, did you really do the grading?" Professor Zayer proudly said, "White, blue, purple, orange, gold, it's easy. Try injecting your magic power into it." Dake injected a trace of magic into the gold door card. But after the magic was injected, a key-like little person popped up on the card. The little person said in a slightly stiff tone, "Identity failed. Identity failed. Identity failed. Please return this card to Zayer. Please return this card to Zayer." In this beep 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 sound, 3 black lines slowly appeared on Dake's forehead. Professor Zayer and Professor Shi Erfu both laughed. In order to cover up his malicious behavior, Professor Zayer quickly said, "It's like this Easter Duel Festival, we want to make it bigger. 2 in 1 4 out of 100 plus. Chapter 371. At first, they came up with the idea of using the door card to lure out the invisible man. But whether it was Professor Zayer or Professor Shi Erfu, they didn't really care about the existence of the invisible man. Especially after the big threat of the vampire Vlad was taken care of, the invisible man seemed even less important. After all, in Shangmalian Academy, such spies were not uncommon. As long as they didn't cause too much trouble, the professors usually didn't care. Now that they had made such a big fuss, if it was just for a mere invisible man, it would inevitably feel like a loss. Therefore, Professor Zayer and Professor Shi Erfu decided to formalize the Easter Duel Festival. It just so happened that there was a lack of some exciting competitions recently. Professor Shi Erfu and the principal talked, and both sides agreed, so this matter was settled. Next. Advertisements, newspapers, tickets, Easter eggs. Remember the website, Vipkanchu. 6 Everything would be done according to the rules of a formal competition. In short, they had to make the Shangmalian Duel Festival a brand. If it was done well, it might even be held every Easter in the future. Wait, Easter eggs? Dake keenly caught the key element and couldn't help but interrupt Professor Zayer's explanation. Professor Zayer smiled mysteriously. "Do you know about Easter eggs?" Dake. Of course I do. Professor Ka-Zayer twirled his magic wand like a pen and said, "After all, it's the Easter Duel Festival. We have to make some souvenirs with a festive atmosphere, so—" Dake hurriedly interrupted. "No, I mean, have you ever thought of selling Easter eggs?" Professor Ka-Zayer was a little confused. Easter eggs are for sale, of course. Our academy's expenses are very high, so we have to find a way to maintain our income. Dake curiously asked, "Then how do you sell them?" "How else?" Professor Ka-Zayer spread his hands and said, 160 holy coins for one, equivalent to 10 credits. Dake shook his head. Why not 188 holy coins? He was only 28 holy coins away from a good omen. Moreover, if they only sold the Easter eggs as souvenirs, even if 10,000 people bought them and each person had one, it would only be 188 million holy coins. How can we make money like this? What do you mean? Professor Ka-Zayer's interest was piqued. However, Professor Shi-Erfu suddenly interrupted. The Easter egg is just a souvenir. The main point is the ticket. The average price of each ticket was around 1,000 holy coins. Each branch can provide us with tens of millions of holy coins in ticket revenue. Even after deducting the costs and expenses, it's still a huge sum. Dake glanced at her and shook his head again. There is no conflict between making money from tickets and making money from lottery tickets. We just need to put a few limited prizes in the Easter eggs sold to the public, and it's easy to double the sales. Of course, the prizes have to be attractive enough. Or, we can make a series. He made a model of the animated magic elf and placed it into the colored egg. The more popular a magic elf is, the fewer there are. Artificially created rarity. If you want to open the model you want, you have to buy far more than the necessary number of Easter eggs. In short, there are many similar methods, and we can even sigh. At this point, Dake suddenly stopped. He suddenly noticed that the money-making method he mentioned might not be very useful to the Academy. After all, the Academy was not short of money at all. However, Professor Shi-Erfu, who had interrupted just now, showed great interest at this time. Don't stop. Continue. Dake couldn't help but smile, then poured himself a cup of black tea and continued, We can add some movable models similar to the magic chess flags in the models. Of course, the number of such models will be smaller and rarer. The most important thing is to do a good job of publicity and let the consumers know what can be found in the Easter eggs. After this Easter, they would be able to break away from the name of Easter and sell Easter eggs all year round without any interval. Believe me, the business opportunity here is very big. Is it taking advantage of the consumer's gambling mentality? Professor Shi-Erfu deliberated. Professor Ka-Zayer also said, artificially creating the rarity to give the rare model extra value. When the time comes, even people who don't like models will buy Easter eggs in order to get a high-value model. Professor Shi-Erfu suddenly blurted out, This is much more reliable than spinach. Dake. Ahem. Professor Shi-Erfu quickly said, Your method is very feasible. However, we still need to prove it. This year's Easter Duel Festival can be used as an experimental field. Dake was surprised. You've decided? Professor Shi-Erfu said casually, People's desire to buy Easter eggs is reflected every Easter. It's just that before you proposed the specific proposal, no one thought of the details. I think it's feasible. Ka-Zayer, what do you think? Professor Ka-Zayer nodded and said, It's very feasible. That's good. Professor Shi-Erfu said, I think a RTI will also agree with your proposal. If your proposal can really generate income for the school will give you the reward you deserve. Seeing that the two professors were about to talk about the Easter egg, Dake quickly said, All right, Professor. Why did you call me here? Don't tell me you just want me to look at this door card? Professor Ka-Zayer said, Of course not. Since the competition is formal, it's not good to just put the door card in the Easter egg as the prize. Also, the 1st to 3rd grade and 4th to 6th grade groups are not suitable. We want to ask if you have any opinions? Not suitable? I think it's quite suitable. Dake smiled. There's still a chance to compete with the 3rd grade. If we compete with the 4th grade, isn't that just asking for trouble? We're just 1st grade newbies. We need a novice protection period. Professor Zayer smiled and said, "You might have misunderstood me. What I meant was to divide them into smaller groups. One group for the 1st to 2nd years, one for the 3rd to 4th years, and one group for the 5th to 6th years. It's just right to divide them into low, middle, and high levels." This is also. I don't think it's possible. Dake said, Easter only lasts for 1 day. Time is already very tight. If the groups are too detailed, the entire competition schedule will become too tight. Professor Zayer nodded and said, "That's true." Dake said, "When the time comes, we'll limit the conditions and reduce the number of people. If only the top 4 are rewarded, there shouldn't be many contestants participating. After all, it's Easter. The duel is only a part of it. We can't put the cart before the horse." "That's what we thought," Professor Shierfu said, "but what if the students want to participate with an entertainment mentality?" This was actually what troubled them. The enthusiasm of the students could not be stopped. As professors, it was not good for them to impose restrictions. Dake thought for a moment and said, "Then let's build a platform for them to perform." Professor Shierfu asked, "What do you mean?" Dake said, "Add a preliminary round where everyone can participate. Every time you kill a magic elf, you'll get 1 point. The first 32 people to get 10 points in half an hour will advance to the main competition." Something like that. Professor Shierfu's expression changed. "That's a good idea. As expected, your thinking is broader." "No, your thinking is too narrow." Dake secretly rolled his eyes. Actually, he could think of many other methods, but this was a simpler one. Moreover, the school did not lack such activities. For example, the Halloween event was very good. However, it seemed to be an event that was created a long time ago and had little to do with the current generation of professors. To put it bluntly, the current generation of professors lacked experience in creating such events. The Shang Malian Academy's on-campus activities had not changed for decades. If it was not for the door card that triggered the idea of an Easter Duel Festival, it would not have changed at all. However, Professor Shierfu was able to correctly recognize his own shortcomings and choose to call people over when he could not solve the problem, instead of sticking to his own ideas. This was already very outstanding. With this experience, they might be able to organize more interesting on-campus activities in the future. For example, the indispensable program in the school, Sports Day. After helping the 2 professors answer more questions related to the Easter Duel Festival, Dake finally left the office before the History of Magic class in the afternoon. Sigh, he touched his empty stomach and sighed softly. After finalizing the details, the Shang Malian Academy was still very active. The next Friday, when Traveler Street opened again, the notice of the Easter Duel Festival was posted on the notice wall at the entrance of the castle. The Duel Club's head Joe William and deputy head Enia Knight personally posted the poster that was made last night on the notice wall. William's red hair was soft and smooth, and he was tall and strong. When he stood next to Enia, who was also tall and had a ponytail, they were quite compatible. However, the two of them did not get along very well. William smoothed out the corner of the poster and looked at the white dragon in the middle of the poster. He said apologetically, "I'll have to rely on you again this time, White Dragon student." Grabbing her blonde hair, Enia grumbled, "Minister William, this is advertising fraud. Pan Duola said that she is not going to participate in this duel festival." William crossed his chest and patiently explained, "Enia, this is not fraud, it's advertising. Even if Doragon is not going to participate in the duel festival, this does not change the fact that she is a student of our academy. And this event is preceded by the Shang Malian Academy, followed by the Easter Duel Festival." Enia was stunned on the spot. After a while, she said angrily, "Head, if you keep doing this, you will be beaten up after graduation." William said slowly, "It's okay. After I go out, there won't be many people who can beat me." "Forget it." Enia chose to give up. "Head, do you think this Easter Duel Festival can be done well? And that Easter egg?" William said again, "Enia, you have to remember that we are only in charge of the Duel Festival. Someone else is in charge of the Model Easter Egg Project. Hey, aren't I just interested? Enia said. Do you think I have a chance to draw the model of my sweetie baby? William asked, is your sweetie baby a popular magic elf? Enia shook her head and was a little depressed. William said, if it's not popular, then you should be able to draw it. Of course, the premise is that there is production. The head and deputy head of the Duel Club were walking signboards. They were enough to attract people just by standing there. After the two of them put up the poster, a student immediately turned around and saw the poster. Easter Duel Festival, the unprecedented mass battle of the qualifiers? Easter egg, the most beautiful white dragon. There are additional events for this year's Easter. The prize for winning is a secret passage pass. You can get a model of a magic elf from the Easter egg? No way. Where can I buy it? The crowd flocked over, and the discussion gradually increased. Most of them were not very interested in the secret passage pass. Instead, it was the mass battle of the qualifiers and the model Easter egg that attracted their attention. After that, in a very short period of time, the news of the Easter Duel Festival spread throughout the castle. Some people even brought the news to Travelers Street. Among them, the more sensitive businessmen immediately realized the business opportunity. Not long after, someone took the initiative to contact the school to discuss the Easter model Easter eggs in-school agency, or simply to produce it. As for the pirated copies, they still wanted to keep a place in Travelers Street. However, this also served as a reminder to the hospital staff in charge of this project. When they produced the model, they did not forget to print the school's emblem and the product serial number at the bottom. Of course, these production works were all carried out by the Shang Malian Duel Library in the local area. This way, they could be put on sale immediately after the production was completed. With the support of magical engineering technology, the productivity of the Shang Malian Academy was very amazing, and the publicity of the models of some popular magic elves had also been quickly launched. On Monday morning, Dake was eating the breakfast brought by the little demon beast while opening the newspaper. He found that the news of the Shang Malian Easter Duel Festival had directly made the headlines of the Great Sage Daily. The next day, the front page of the Great Sage Daily was completely dominated by the illustration of the popular magic elf. Even the Great Sage Daily was like this, not to mention the other small newspapers. At this moment, inside and outside the kingdom, even the elves, orcs, and other subhuman countries had been attacked by the overwhelming advertisements. It could be seen that once the huge machine that was the Shang Malian Academy was in operation, it really could not be underestimated. Although there was only a short half a month before Easter, it seemed to be enough time. Influenced by this from the inside to the outside, and then from the outside to the inside, the Shang Malian Academy also began to be excited about Easter. Originally, Easter was a fixed Sunday holiday, and there were no extra holidays or special events, so it had never caused any fluctuations. But this year's Easter was obviously different. For example, the first-year boys were especially interested in the Duel Festival's audition. 4100/10,000, thank you to Salted Fish with a Dream for the golden treasure chest. I wish Big Brother Taurus good news and all your wishes come true. There are only 8 hours left until the reward ends. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.